I will call the WSESD board to order. The meeting of the WSESD board will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a matter of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. I will say that last time we did a remote one, we had a few technical difficulties. As we're working through the bugs, you know, in Vermont, technology sometimes can be challenging, so we're gonna forge on and keep trying to go through this process. But I want to thank BCTV because even though the public may not have been able to access it in, you know, through the online, BCTV assured me that they had recorded all of it, so that is certainly something to be thankful for. So now, are there any motions to amend the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to student matters. Are there any? I don't see any students here, but are there any students in the online who would like to speak? I'll ask a second time. Students who would like to speak for the student matters. Going 3 times, student matters. Okay. We are going to move on, and if any pop in, we can see if we can accommodate them. So we will move on to the administrative report. Mark?
Okay, I'm excited tonight to report out on some updates around our MLSS development. So to present tonight, we'll have a handful of folks, myself, Bryn Tucker, curriculum coordinator, Selena Romo, teacher at UHS, Mary Kaufman, principal at Oak Grove School, and I believe joining us online are John Sessions, principal at Putney Central, and Lorraine Reevy, teacher at Academy School. So I'll start with an overview of our work and just kind of take you back to really the first days of my superintendency. I've talked at length about the importance of systems development, specifically around, which was MTSS, as you remember, multi-tiered systems of support, which has morphed into MLSS, multi-layered systems of support, as well as the importance of highly functioning educational support teams at all of our schools with the acronym ESTs. So tonight is really an opportunity for us to give an update on progress that we've made around MLSS work. The presentation tonight is nowhere near complete. It's not a complete product. It's essentially progress that we've made. There's still much work to do in all of our schools, and frankly, all of our schools are in different places. For the past 2 years, year and a half, we've really focused on identifying what best practice and the important elements that need to be in place in terms of having a highly functioning MLSS school as well as an EST school. We've transitioned into implementation of best practice of those that we have identified. And again, we're at different places in all of our schools, but tonight is an opportunity to share where we've gone. In terms of communication systems that we have in place and what is new this year in terms of supporting the development of both MLSS and EST is we now have monthly meetings, fixed indoor schedule for representatives of all of our schools to collectively meet. Our MLSS team is facilitated by Bryn Tucker, who's here tonight, will help present. And then our EST team has been facilitated by Whitney Lyon, our elementary coordinator, special ed coordinator. These meetings set up monthly or every 6 weeks are an opportunity outside of administrative meetings to make connections across our schools, to share best practice, to share experiences at our schools, to continue to develop the work that we're doing and to further develop the vision as we move forward. Those two systems are newly in place this year. Another system I'd like to highlight, we talked about it at our last meeting, is systems of data review, formal opportunities to have data meetings across the school district. We do have data benchmark meetings established for our winter, our fall, winter, and spring. We've had our fall benchmark meetings, winter's coming up in January. Just like to share that this work is extremely important. It's work that I totally believe in. It's work that I enjoy. And I have dedicated myself to be a member of those monthly meetings for both MLSS and EST because I love the work and also to show that the work is supremely important and work that we need to invest in and continue to. As well as the data meetings this year. I've made a commitment to attend all of those. Moving forward, in terms of building systems, tonight you'll see an overview of kind of best practice and a focus on how we go about database decision making. We'll see best practice in terms of what is the ideal and what we're striving for, not necessarily where we are in all of our schools. We've talked a bit about peer observation this year. Peer observation will continue to be a tool where we expand our ability to collaborate across schools. In terms of some student impact, we'll be sharing 2 specific case studies tonight. One focused on academic progress and one focused on SEL and behavior progress. So again, these are 2 specific case studies at 2 of our schools, which I think do resemble best practice and examples that we will strive for to continue to emulate in all of our schools, in all of our grade levels. At the end of the presentation, we have some questions that we've asked the board to have a collaboration on that we can engage in tonight. What additional data would be helpful to guide our work? What is the board most excited about in terms of MLSS development? What would the ST board like to see in a future update? Because we will be providing many updates moving forward. And then just simply suggestions for improvement. So that's the overview. And from there, I will turn it over to Bren. And
Mr. Gagnon, can we, I'm afraid to touch the lights. And also knock something off. Is that a little better? Thank you.
If you would
Too
join
dark?
Zoom, then the people at home would be able to see your.
Maybe we do half. How's that?
But, no, I mean, if you join Zoom, you're not sharing your screen at the moment, because you're not in Zoom.
Do we have the camera on the screen? Will that work?
And I can zoom in all the way on it.
Okay, it's kind of bad, but.
I mean, if we want to try and get on Zoom, we can do that too. It's up to you.
I can log on.
Okay.
I'll get on and show.
Perfect. Do you have access to it, Paul? Or maybe, Mary, could you reshare with Paul? Yep. Something, I just want to highlight something. It's not just a random picture of a bed, although I did use the slides template for it. So when we're talking about MLSS, I think one helpful metaphor that we've really thought about is what are the layers that are there when we need them, and how do we take the layers off when we don't? And we might have had some of this conversation with you all before, but I'm thinking about it like, in the summer I can sleep with a light sheet on because I don't need a lot of warmth. I can just have that layer. And then as autumn comes, maybe I have another, like cotton quilt or something. And then winter's coming in, I might put my light down comforter on. And last night felt really cold, and now I've got another layer on. And we're thinking about MLSS systems for our students to support their academic and also their social emotional needs in a similar way. Not taking away the sheet, not taking away all of the blankets, but adding layers when needed and then taking away layers when needed as well. And so I wanted to include that to kind of ground the work, to think about what is really a multi-layered system of support. It's a mouthful to say, but it's really that idea of like, what can we layer on and then also take off as needed to really give our students what they need. So this is a graphic that a lot of our K-6, 8 schools have been using to think about these layers. The purple layer is really our universal core instruction. It's what every student has access to in a rich learning environment. Some students might need a little more, and that's our layer 2, and that might be opportunities to enhance access or to change the way a student demonstrates their learning or to provide a little scaffold for what's happening in the classroom. So that would be an example of a layer support that we put on, but we're not taking them out of their core learning in order to do that. The layer 3 might be a reteach, so it might be an additional academic block or time with a social worker or a counselor where a student needs extra and they get another chance to practice. And layer 4 is really our specialized instruction for students who need a highly specific intervention or something extra. Could also be enrichment, right? And this is also in addition to all the other things the student's receiving. So we're thinking about there's more than one. We've got different layers. We've got lots of support for students as the needs dictate. And as Mark said, we are working on building that to more and less capacity in different schools and refining those supports and learning what's best evidence-based practice. And then I think a place where we're really coordinating and trying to focus on this year is building those systems to help it all come together. Because it sounds really easy, like making a bed, but in practice in really busy, complicated school systems, it can be a lot to make sure all of these pieces are working together to best support students in terms of schedules, resources, times, access to curriculum. But this is kind of what we have in mind when we're thinking about MLSS. And I'm going to turn over to Selena, who's going to share a similar idea, but with the context and model of BUHS.
Yeah, so at BUHS over the summer, there was a group of us that have kind of gotten together to figure out what MLSS looks like in the high school system, because it's very different from what it looks like in the elementary schools. Kids are moving classes every day, they have multiple teachers, so it's just a different animal. So we also selfishly wanted to incorporate the bears, so really make it our own. But also because this is really different language at the high school. We haven't had systems like this in the past before, so we really wanted to target like very specific things to be able to say, this is actually what this looks like. These are the actual systems that we need in place. This is actually what best practice looks like. So we really dialed it in, and this is what our BUHS MLSS committee came up with and then distributed to all of our staff at our all-staff opening days in August. So this is kind of how we're moving forward as our layers.
A lot of this work was driven from Act 173 legislature that's passed and is now in effect in the state of Vermont. Essentially, Act 173 started as a special education funding rule change, but it also really changed how we approach delivery of services and the consideration of how we're meeting the needs of students in our school systems. So Act 173's theory of action kind of identifies these 4 main pillars or columns that serve as the foundation for really effective systems. So our education support teams, Mark mentioned those 4 to 6 week periodic meetings from representatives across all schools. And that's the idea of putting layers of support in a systematic way in place for students. Our local comprehensive assessment system, which I know we've talked about here before, our WSESU curriculum and assessment toolkit that we use to guide a lot of that work, and the layers of assessment that we do to guide different pieces of information that allow us to respond to student needs. Our coordinated curriculum, I think, is something that's very much a huge investment in the last couple years in terms of rolling out consistent curriculum in process K through 8 for literacy and math, consistent phonics curriculum, and also beginning some of those conversations at the high school about coordinating that curriculum as well. Lots of requests are coming from teachers as well to bring back vertical team meetings to help with vertical alignment. So from 7th through 12th grade to really talk about the scope and sequence of topics, which we'll be doing this spring. And really needs-based professional development. So again, layers of professional development that can be developed by teacher choice through district-wide professional development, for some of the school-based professional development that happened just the 2 days before Thanksgiving break. And also the peer observation process, our mentor program, really in the moment needs in terms of what we need to learn. And we're constantly identifying what's needed next when we identify some barriers that are there. So Act 173 really says these are the main pillars to establish and meet the goals and needs of Act 173. And we're assuming that that allows kind of the roof or the rest of the structure to be built for best practices.
So shout out quick just to Bryn, because thank you for the grant writing that Bryn did tirelessly and amazingly over the summer to bring VIII the first local comprehensive assessment system it's ever had, so thank you. So best practices, so just to be reading from the slide, core instruction meets the needs of most students, so that way every student is accessing their core instruction in the classroom with a content specialist. Additional layers of instruction and intervention are added into the core instruction, so that's where special educators and academic support teachers feed in to create access points for all learners. Instruction at all layers comes from the most highly skilled teachers, right? So particularly at the high school, we all have content specialists, we have social studies teachers and science teachers. Those are the folks that really know the science curriculum, more so than a special educator that has many different skills, but they're not the content specialists. So moving towards creating access points from those highly skilled teachers. We have system-wise approaches to support positive student behavior, so that's that SEL component. And then we target specialized supports to students with more intensive needs. So that's that layer 3 and 4, where we can identify students who need multiple layers of things to be able to help them have a successful day at school.
So just a connection to our finance meeting before this meeting, an investment that we made at the high school was in hiring academic support teachers to help facilitate core instruction, intervention within core, and then more opportunities to efficiently give students what they need based on data. So that's an investment that we made a couple of years ago and are hoping to continue with to support this work moving forward.
Yeah, it's been really, really positive to see students be able to access things with their peers in the least restrictive environment. This is the first year we've been fully staffed to do this, and there is a special educator and an academic support teacher that are assigned to each of the core content areas this year. So we have significantly reduced the number of special education specific class offerings. So we're no longer teaching the separate classrooms, and students are accessing their
Can you explain more about that? I'm not quite picturing how it works in the high school. Take an English Lit course. You have 15 students. What kind of data collection do you have to identify students who are just not getting Wordsworth?
That's a great question. So we have students who are already pre-identified with disabilities, whether you have a 504 plan or an IEP. So we already have those students identified with a specific learning disability or other disability categories that identify that they need additional supports in school. Through the EST process, where we identify students that may not have a qualifying disability but need some additional support throughout their school day, whether it's academic or social emotional. So AST and special educators and counselors, guidance counselors, who's on the SST committee. So there's like a group of folks, it's called the student support team. School counselors. Yeah.
SAP counselor.
They meet weekly to identify students that need additional support. And then throughout the actual school day. So like, for example, there is a social studies class that I support during block 1. And I know right off the bat at the beginning of the school year that out of the 20 students in the class, 8 of them have individualized plans where they have specific accommodations and needs to that they have, like whether it's extended time or they need an alternative reader or whatever their plan dictates as their support. So then I consult and collaborate with the social studies teacher to create those access points throughout the curriculum.
But isn't that the same as pre-MLSS?
Not the high school. No, in the past there was separate classes for students with disabilities.
Okay.
Yeah, so like if Selena had an IEP and I had a specific learning disability in reading comprehension, I would have a separate English and social studies class. I might have an alternative science class and not be in the mainstream classroom with my peers.
So you're saying this is implemented now, this year?
Yes. Yes, it started last year. We piloted it right around 2021. COVID was a little funny, right? So we were piloting it in the science department, and then it started last year, but we had some staffing stuff, and this year we're fully staffed.
And if a student isn't getting a concept in English Lit, and he goes to level 3, then you give him that extra support and then back off when he gets it. And
Yeah, exactly. And they might be receiving that specific intervention within the classroom if they're doing a small reading group within the classroom, or we have an academic support time built into our daily schedule where we might say, oh, I'm going to pull Mary into my academic time today to review the reading from earlier.
so isn't this necessitating a whole lot more evaluation
As far as evaluation of
student progress, individual
Of student progress.
individual student progress?
Yes, there is. So, as my shout out to Bryn, for our LCAS system, the high school is in its first year of using a benchmarking system. So, in addition to to teacher reports and formative and summative assessments, we now also have a benchmarking system to be able to track student data.
We also have more opportunities for collaboration. When you have co-teaching models and teachers working together to provide core instruction, you have opportunities to evaluate student work together, to take a look at student exit tickets of a lesson together. So yeah, there's benchmark data, but there's also real-time data in just assessing how the kids access the lesson based on observation and also based on work samples.
Yeah, I mean, I could even say after a class, like, oh, Mary, Mark didn't get that lesson. What do you think we need to do to strategize to make sure that we can access that tomorrow?
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. I'm particularly interested in the couple of aids that you had mentioned previously. How many with those aids in particular, could you reference, or do you have a sense of how many students not on an IEP or 504, perhaps on an EST, or otherwise, maybe even not identified on an EST, that are able to access that? I have sort of an antiquated understanding of MTSS, and tier 3, 4 seemed relegated to only folks that had 504s or IEPs. And I wanted to check, I think what I'm hearing the administration is saying is now kids that are on ESTs or maybe even not, have access to additional layers. Is that what you all are saying?
100%.
And I think that's fantastic.
It changes the conversation from being, oh, you're my student because you have an IEP and I'm a special educator. No, this is a system for all students. This is not your student or my student. This is all of our students.
Instead of waiting for a child to fail, responding in real time and providing those resources.
It's really opened up the way we can work with kids. I mean, I sit in on team meetings at school and just watch like academic support teachers, special educators, classroom teachers, paras all work together to figure out who's the best fit for this kid in this moment, for this skill. And then that can change. It doesn't have to be the same person every time.
So this is happening in the classroom. Do you see that the students who you were not really targeting or sort of like focusing on, that those students are also like hearing what you're doing and talking about, and that they might also be benefiting even if they're not ones that you would necessarily say are
Oh, definitely. I wander around and talk to every student in the class. I'm not just talking to the students that have plans. I'm talking to everybody. And I create different groups depending on what's happening with them and do different things with them. So it's really, and that's a model that a lot of students are more familiar with from the elementary school. So it's not like, oh gosh, Selena's here to only talk to that kid. Like, so it's really become it's a much more like I don't know, it's just like a nicer system feels like you're hugging.
Inclusive.
There you go, that's the word I'm looking for.
I think a lot of feedback we get from teachers also, when we have more of these push-in models and consult models, is that teachers are no longer in a vacuum in terms of like, I've got this number of kids in front of me and I don't know how to meet all of their specific needs. That co-teaching model or that consult model allows professional collaboration to grow both of the teachers' practice, whether it's really focusing on the students' work from that day to see what needs to happen next, or even like, wow, I love how you redirected that student. It worked so well. I'm gonna go and take that in the next classroom that I'm in and model that, and then our best practice can spread.
Yeah.
I wanna share too, I mean, we're talking about this and I think it is making huge shifts. We've already seen huge shifts in our least restrictive environment data after the implementation of this specifically at the high school. By no means do we have it all figured out either. And so I want to be very clear about that. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of like, we want to do this, but how can we fix the schedule to do that? Or how can we get this extra resource? Or how can we get the training to teach this kind of program? And so as we get better at the system, it also identifies the additional things that we need to get better at. And so in that way, it is a continuous process as well.
I mean, our crew developed a 4-year plan. This is not something that's going to be implemented overnight and fix everything. This is like a multi-year evolution of systems change.
Tim?
We keep talking about B student. Does it occur that you have a group of students who are form a little group that receive tier 2 or 3 instruction?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you can, the groupings.
It's not always one-on-one tutorial.
Correct. Yeah.
Rarely.
I mean, it's richer for the students to be in
Right.
small groups, for sure, to learn from each other.
The other thing that's really opened up, and I am not an expert on Act 173, but my understanding of what's really opened up with Act 173 is the flexibility for any teacher to work with any student. So there's no longer this rule of like, well, I'm a special educator, so only children with the documented IEP can be in my group of 5. Now it's like, well, I happen to be a special educator teaching this specific phonics skill, and 3 of these students have an IEP who need that, and there's these other 2 who are struggling in class as well. Let me pull them in for 6 weeks and get them the skill, and then we'll see how they're doing, and maybe they just go back. Or maybe I keep those, and the kids on an IEP are ready to go back. And so there's a lot more flexibility within that system. Yeah.
I find this topic very fascinating because they've been doing this in Europe, and they call it nurturing, like a nurturing education. So one of the things that came up was students that are having difficulty in reading, and bring them into small groups and saying like, what do you want to read? And there were like kids that were like really interested in sci-fi, and then there were kids that were like really interested in planets. Do you guys do things where when you're doing the small groups, like catering to what that group would like to learn?
Yeah, I think that probably varies on the teacher and the skill and the need in that moment. We've really developed a lot of expertise and are absolutely still learning in terms of science of reading and the best evidence-based practices, because when we are doing these small pull-out groups, there's only so much time in the day. So if I have a small group of kids, it does mean that they are missing something else. And so we want to get the absolute biggest impact during that time with our students, using the best evidence-based practices that we can to really target the skills that they need so they're ready to rejoin their peers. That said, I don't know a teacher in this district who doesn't want to try to follow students' interests and passion to try to build that sense of engagement. So I think it is both. I've seen lots of examples of that. But I would say primarily when our skilled interventionists are taking kids out to do a reading intervention, for example, because the student, it might be a 5th grader reading at a 2nd grade level, their primary focus is what is the skill deficit and how do we engage that with direct engaging instruction with lots of opportunities to practice and respond, so we can kind of remediate that skill and get them back into their grade with their classmates, in the soonest possible way. And then during our kind of core time is more of a time where all of the students working together, more comprehension, vocabulary, rich background kind of project-based learning, and that's where we really want kids to be. if we run out of time, I just want to, it's because of your amazing questions.
Can you, just one little question, how are you getting student feedback to this change? This seems like a pretty seismic shift in how the students are going to experience things. How are you getting feedback from them on how it feels from them, from their perspective? Is that happening?
Climate surveys, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Climate survey.
Yeah,
I would say we
but
get that
specifically
feedback.
this.
We get that feedback every day in every way in what we're seeing with students in many ways. And we'll show you some examples of data collection that we look at like on a big picture and then in a more minute way. But I also see teachers doing a lot of things like, hey, thumbs up or thumbs down, how did it go today? Rate one thing that you learned, what's something you want to do next? You know, those kind of engagement strategies and instructional practices that we know have high impact. I think also our behavior data shows a lot how kids are feeling and how engaged they are. And so we're beginning to track that on a more micro level at the schools to see, well, when incidents are happening, where are they happening? Are they happening in the playground? Are they happening in your intervention group? Are they happening in the core classroom? And that also helps to tell
It's
the story
it's
back.
very complex. There's not one singular way to get that feedback. It's multi-dimensional. I think it relates to the conversation we had at the last board meeting.
I'll give an example. Today I was meeting with a teacher and there was a student, a high school student, who was taking a nap on the floor. And the student was exhausted and had a moment where they were feeling a lot of anxiety and weren't able to do what needed to happen in the classroom that day. And it was the most nurturing, calm environment. We carried on with our meeting. And afterward, the student woke up and they said, I think that I'm ready to learn now. And I think in that moment, we're also modeling this multi-layered system of support of like, that was the support that that student needed in that moment. It wasn't like there were kids napping all over the floor in this high school classroom. It was like one moment of what the kid needed to feel nurtured and safe, and then they could likely, looked like they were ready to go back to learning. Their friend came in and like woke them up gently and checked in with them, and then they were off to class. So I think that's a piece too that helps us know, are we meeting kids? And it's different day to day and kid to kid, honestly. Yeah. Okay, go on. All right. So Mary's going to talk about some examples of what these pillars look like in our schools right now.
Sure. I think I can make up some time.
We've talked about some of these already.
So last year we did a lot of work on educational support teams. That's our EST. We had a whole new process that was great. It's really been rolled out and feels much more comprehensive across the district. We're all, I think, on the same page. That's the goal, at least. But we have common kid talk forums and EST plans. We set goals at those meetings. And at each school, that process looks the same, so that if a kid moves from one place to another, everybody knows what, they know the plan, they know what it looks like, they know what to expect. We do some work, continue to work with Judy Maynard, who's a state consultant. She's been fabulous. She works with our leadership team pretty frequently. She's a great facilitator, and she really helps us think and troubleshoot and come up with great ideas. I think she brings out the best in everybody she works with.
Yeah, she's great. And just to make the connection, Judy is the woman who facilitated our board retreat.
Could you remind us what SSIP means?
State Systemic Improvement Plan.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to Google some of the acronyms here, but myself. We have a coordinated curriculum, again, for the first time in a long time. Ever, yes. We all of our K-8 schools now have the same math program and the same literacy program. Illustrative math is what we're doing in math. Expeditionary learning is our core literacy block time, and all of our schools are now in their full year of both being implemented. So we had a few pilot years where classrooms could pick one program to try out, like one module, so every school did math last year except for 2. They did literacy, and then every school is doing literacy this year, so we're all caught up. Everybody's got both programs up and running. And then K-3, we have our specific phonics program, either Foundations or UFLY, University of Florida Literacy Intervention. And I would just actually amazing to watch. Kids are so engaged in it, and it is fun. It's easy for teachers, which is like a win-win situation. I would love to teach a U-Fly lesson any day because it is very fun to watch. Our local comprehensive assessment systems, which is our assessment toolkit, lists all of the things that are accessible for our teachers to use with students to figure out where the needs are, what are the pieces of literacy or math that need to be worked on. I'm sure that's a link, but I think we've all seen the toolkit.
It is a link, and we don't have time to get into it tonight, but if you're interested, that is a homegrown made resource within our school district over a large number of years, probably 12 years. But it's definitely a resource that we're really proud of and continue to work on.
And you can find everything you need in there. So it's a huge shout out to the curriculum office, because if you're ever looking for something, you just go to that toolkit. There's a table of contents, it tells you exactly what to look for. So it's an amazing resource that all of our staff have access to. And then finally, some needs-based professional development. So there's been trainings around special education law, that changed in Act 173. Executive functioning. Last year, every staff member, faculty, staff member, I think everybody was here, had an executive functioning professional development, which was great. There was a lot of useful tools that came right out of that teachers were implementing in classrooms the next day. It was really positive. It was a really positive experience for everybody who works with kids. And then we've had ongoing math instruction, embedded coaching, and access to the district level expertise. So all of our buildings have instructional coaches who can help with facilitating work around anything that teachers need, but there can be a focus on the new curriculum such as EL or IM.
And again, I would say we're scratching the surface with instructional coaching.
Yeah.
That again, an investment through ESSER funds, and it's in place, and we're still looking to learn from our experiences and develop systems to support the coaches and our teachers.
And I would say in full transparency, that looks different at some of the different sites in terms of what the focus of the coaches are. I think a lot of that was the product of when that ESSER pot of money was originally available and quickly setting up the program. We do not have instructional coaches at the high school, and that's been identified as a potential need in terms of really providing that instructional leadership and support for teachers. A couple of our other elementary schools don't have formal coaches, but do have access to that coaching. So again, it's a system, and we're still kind of working out some of the pieces in terms of really optimizing that.
And I think the coaches across the district all have different areas of expertise, and so getting to know those areas and then figuring out where to, how do we use that system in a way that really supports all of our students and staff.
Our coaches also meet for a half day every month to share best practice with each other. And like the last meeting we had, they did a consultancy protocol where coaches brought a challenge that they were facing in a confidential environment, and we were able to explore that with peers to get feedback. Or they're able to share resources with one another, or even get ideas like, hey, what are you using for that social emotional coaching? Could I borrow that resource? So it's always like this huge, it's like a Yankee swap, but better, every time they meet. And that's really been driven more and more by the coaches setting the agendas, facilitating the meetings, and making the time to be together. Because it can be kind of an isolating role when you're the only one doing that job in a building. So more to come on that, and also expansion of that program so we can really support the high school as well. Or really refining what roles in the high school can serve some of those functions for the teacher staff. All right, we're 1/4 of the way through. I'll speak quickly about this and then turn over to Selena to talk more about the committee work. But really, we're working to have these MLSS guides or representatives from each school come together and then also go back to their schools. So they're bringing information from the schools and then disseminating information and ideas back out to the schools. So really working across the system in that way. We've done some work this year to update communication for families about the EST process, specifically in our K-6-8 schools. And with a new EST coordinator hired for the VOHS system, who's also working closely with the EST coordinator at BAMS, there's more development of systems in those two buildings that's ongoing, so hopefully we'll be able to publish something similar for those schools. At conferences, recently data overviews were shared for each student. Is a bridge to talk about what kind of supports might be in place to support the students' needs. And similarly, now that we're on a similar benchmark system across the district, benchmark data were either shared directly with BAMS families prior to conferences, or the plan for sharing the benchmark information throughout the year was shared with BOHS families, as well as our VT-CAP data for any student who took that state standardized test last spring. So not just thinking about communicating within our school systems, but how are we bridging communication with families in a way that's accessible and meaningful and doesn't turn a conference about a student's joys and goals and strengths into some kind of like stock market report. So we're really working on that as well, of using data to help as one piece of the information to really support the whole child. So we'll talk a little bit more about what this committee work that's evolving looks like.
So at the high school, it was pretty grassroots level. Last year, there was a group of academic support teachers and special educators that all took a year-long training with Jen Patno around Act 173 and the systems changes that were coming down the pike. And then from there, we were like, hey, we have to have a conversation. So we started getting together and meeting. And from there, we did some work over the summer together. It's a nice representation of academic support teachers, special educators, social workers, classroom teachers, a department head from the art department. Our assistant principal, Tracy Lane, is on the committee. And Jen Horse, also our ELL coordinator, is on the committee as well. So we have a nice diverse representation to be able to go and have real meaningful conversations throughout the entire building. And from there we have, so we meet every 6 weeks. Myself and Nancy Johnston, our school improvement coordinator, are representatives on the district-wide committee. So being able to have that collaborative time also with other folks in the district to be like, oh, wait, you have a data meeting coming up? I want to go to your data meeting and see what that looks like. So then and that's new for the high school too, which is really exciting. So I'm hoping actually we can come to Domerston soon and see what that looks like.
Great.
And so that also is super new and different, which is very exciting. Just to be able to have that whole room full of information and to be able to share is really cool. And then we go back and share that back with our committee. We have subcommittees that are working from it and like pulling in other staff and faculty members to help us along the way too, which is super fun. So it's very grassroots teacher-driven initiative at the high school, which I'm not sure if I think it's a little bit different at the elementary levels. And I think it's different in each building depending on their leadership committees or their data teams. So like each school has different committees that are already working within them. So some of them are already organically their MLSS committee. So because I think you have
our leadership team.
Your leadership team is yours, that's right.
Also does our MLSS.
Yeah, so it's just a little different.
So on the committee, so this is the district-wide committee made up of members from each school in the district. There were goals set for the year, and I think we've done a really good job of meeting them and working to continue to work on them. So every teacher knows what Act 173 theory of action and best practices. We have universal district goals, which we came up with at the summer admin retreat. And then schools created their own goals that were related to those district-wide goals at the beginning of the school year. And those goals are related then to MLSS and to Act 173. The second goal was to centralize resources for MLSS and the processes and teaching. So having that toolkit available and accessible to everybody, shared drives in Google so that people can access all of the forms and everybody's using those common pieces. And then 3, create a centralized and localized MLSS and Act 173 steering committee, which is a way to target and create goals and then action steps throughout the year. That committee then takes that back to each individual school so that schools can do that work within their buildings. So each school is working towards their own goals, and then as a district, we're working together to meet the goals as well.
I feel really lucky to be a buddy, an MLSS buddy to 2 different schools. And it's really interesting, one is the high school, so they have a 4-year plan and it's very detailed, right? And the committee has done that work to develop that work over the course of the long term. And then I'm working with another school that's really taking the approach of like, what is the low-hanging fruit that we can really identify right now before winter break, and what kind of impact will that make for kids that we can immediately see and celebrate? And there are 2 different approaches, I think, based on how each of those schools saw the immediate needs. It doesn't mean that you guys aren't also working on immediate needs, and it doesn't mean that this school isn't looking at the long-term vision as well, but thinking about what is the need of my community right now and really adapting the system to meet those local goals.
So back in the spring, there was a survey that was sent out to all of the schools, kind of like evaluating every school's structure, right, and systems to figure out what the need was and what also were the things that were going really well. So like, let's identify the things that are working really well in certain places and what are the things that we can identify for future. So this is data that is a collection of all of the schools in the district. So for the high school, it might be slightly different. For Dummerston, it's going to be different. For Oak Grove, it's going to be different. So it's, just knowing that, Mark's preface at the beginning about we are all just figuring this out and still scratching the surface. There's a lot of room for growing, but we also have a lot of glows that have been very successful this year. So these are the things that were identified from the MLS survey about ways to improve our planning for Act 173 and MLSS.
And these are categories that were taken from information given from Judy Maynard, our representative and our consultant, and also documents provided by the Agency of Education. So we didn't just make this up. These are kind of main areas to look at. And so this has been informative as schools think about what do we need to work on first.
I'm sorry, could you go back for a second?
Mm-hmm.
What did the numbers mean on this?
So each of these, there were questions within each category. So each of the 8 bars represents a category that was in the self-assessment survey. And then there were questions with each one, and schools rated themselves a 0, 1, 2, or 3 in terms of their emergence toward proficiency, if you will. Or
So
really
3 is like, we're nailing it, everything's perfect.
Totally. And there was a very detailed rubric for each question to help teams identify what they had in place. And so that's just the average of all of the questions for that category across the district.
And like Selena was saying, each individual school, their bars may look much different based on where each school is.
I think it helped us look district-wide and say, we really need to improve progress monitoring, and I think every school identified that as well. And so that's been a consistent goal across most schools to say, this is something that we can implement and track and take a look at and do better at right away. And wow, let's celebrate that we feel like our special ed services and our layer 3 intervention is really strong right now, and how can we look at that and celebrate that and deepen that as well.
And what does fidelity mean in this context?
Fidelity was fidelity of the core curriculum and the programs, the evidence-based programs that are being taught.
So like, are they teaching the curriculum?
As intended.
Okay.
Eva?
This is a question for you and for our superintendent. So if a school has a lot of English learners for the first time, and then you have a school with like native English learners, when they're doing proficiency, do they separate the two? Does that make sense?
You mean for students to get their multilingual services?
So if we say, for instance, say a school is meeting 50% proficiency, and you would say maybe like 30% of those students are learning English for the first time, would that affect the proficiency for the whole school?
In terms of large-scale statewide assessment like the old, NSBAC, thank you, the new VT cap, I know that one. Any student in their first year at a level 1 in the ESOL program is exempt from the large-scale assessment. Subsequent to that, they do participate in the large-scale assessment, and they also there's an Access for L's English language learner assessment that they take on a regular basis. So strictly speaking, no, those students are not included in the statewide assessment for the first year that they are present in Vermont schools.
And then, so after the second year they would be. And then that first year, is there a proficiency requirement for what you would expect for them for that first year?
There is no expectation that they would be rated in terms of VTCAP proficiencies or standards.
Okay.
We do use local programs and local assessments through our English language learner, multilingual learner department that do collect baseline data and measure progress of those students' language acquisition and academic skills over time.
That's the Access for L's assessment.
And then it may be another piece, once they do start taking that state summative assessment, we can disaggregate the data to say what percentage of all students were proficient, what percentage of English language learners were proficient, so we can look at the data that way in the reporting system once they do enter into that system as well. All right, so the systems and what it looks like in our schools, we're thinking of three main things there. You can see maybe on my computer too, right?
So the systems that we have are our student support, so that's our Kid Talk and EST process, intervention work, social workers and counselors, and then student success teams. Our flexible groupings and coaching I think the flexible groupings has really come a long way since Act 173 went into place, but this is working on short-term flexible groupings for students, both academically and social emotionally, across the schools. And then instructional and district coaching is available to support the process. And then finally, we have database decision-making. So at the elementary level, K-6 and K-8 schools, 3 times a year we meet for benchmark meetings where we look at that benchmark data, fall, winter, and spring. And then BAMS has data meetings in their teams. We're working on developing a system at VIII that makes sense for a much different looking schedule and team.
And frankly, more challenge in finding common planning time throughout the day when all teachers are teaching so many subjects and so many students throughout that moving system.
I think the key to this slide is systems that are under construction and that are still being developed and worked on.
If I could tout Selena's work and other folks in the district too, Selena took a course this summer with some consultants that the Agency of Education hired in Vermont called Demonstrated Success. Mm-hmm. And then also a course that's a graduate course, right? And Selena and Christy Henderson just brought those consultants to VIII and BAMS to run trainings for the teachers.
So one of our instructors actually came down during our PD day just before Thanksgiving and did a data protocol with all of our teachers in BAMS and VIII. We looked at our panorama data specifically because we didn't really want to target academic data. The first time we had teachers go through a data protocol because that's a little intimidating, especially if we're going to look at math data. I'm a math teacher, oh God. So just wanting to get people used to the idea and having them understand what a data protocol is, how do you look at data, how do you look at it objectively before you jump to wanting to interpret it, so just the process that you need to go through to be able to really understand, to inform decision making. So that was a really awesome thing that she came down and did that with us for a day. So all teachers in BAMS and VIII had a workshop session with her.
I would say equally as important to that was Selena and Christy's work that they did a data dive of the Start 360 results.
We
all staff members so that they could look at their individual classes and where students were lacking skills so that they could build that into their, that was
Huge.
Staff feedback was so positive over that one part of the day. So
That's awesome.
You can go through this funny looking one.
We're talking about data. I wanted to show you a quick, and I know it's small, and we'll post these on the website. But this is an example of a system that many of our schools are using called Forefront, which can collect data from multiple sources and give an at a glance. And so a teacher logs in, this is a teacher view, and I might see up at the top, here's how my kids are doing in their spelling related to all kids in the district, and here's how they're doing with their reading, and here's a math assessment. And although it's difficult to see, this is a standards wheel for math, and so any assessment that I've given that links to those specific standards so far is gonna give me an aggregate of how kids in my class are doing, for example. And so I'll blow that up. This is what the standard wheel looks like. They're linked to the Common Core standards. It's also linked to our report card reporting. And I might see a specific area, and this is hard to see here, but I might say, well, who are these 4 kids right here who don't quite have this standard yet? And a teacher can even click on that specifically, and it will pop up a screen that lists exactly the 4 kids who need to work on that skill. And so this is a new reporting system that we're working with this year. There's a steep learning curve. We're building the reports ourselves. I'm not a computer programmer, but we are pretending to be one. And we're learning. But the power in this to be able to really look at it and say, all right, I taught my math lesson today, or we finished unit 1. Who got it, who didn't? Can I pull this small group for a week and reinforce that, and then go right back into the classroom is a powerful way to be able to meet kids' needs. So I wanted to share kind of an overview of that. And then as we think about student impact, we have a couple examples here. And I heard that Laureen Reevy is on the Zoom to represent the first grade team from Academy. So hopefully she can maybe unmute. I'll give a quick intro to these data. This is our DIBELS benchmark system. So when first graders come in the fall, they read what's called nonsense words. So they might have a sheet of paper in front of them that says like t, iv, g, a, b. And they can either read it as individual sounds or they can say tiv, geb. And last year, all of the first graders at Academy, 79% of them were at achievement level 1 when they came into first grade. And so this is what the first grade team was working with, this particular cohort of kids that came in. And then you can see the change. This is the winter results. And then this is the spring results. Same kids, matched cohort across the year. And when we saw this come in, I really had to ask the team, like, oh my gosh, what happened to support this kind of instrumental change and what I consider to be like the most intimidating grade level to ever teach, because you're teaching kids how to read, and it's like the only one I haven't taught, K-8. So we asked the teachers, what contributed to this. I sent them an email over the summer. I think I got like 8 responses from all the people on the team. And so here's some of the things that were shared. And I'm not sure if Laureen is there. Is she there?
Okay, I'm here. Sure.
Hi, Laureen.
Hi.
I hope I presented accurately.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfect.
Okay, great. So Bryn did a beautiful job of capturing our thoughts. Paul, are you able to pull it up on the screen that I'm looking at? Or no? Okay, there we go. Great. So Bryn reached out and captured it beautifully here, just to speak to it a little bit. Unanimously across the board, all of us could not emphasize enough having a schedule in place that really maximizes student intervention time and having staff members available at particular like high leverage times of the day. So the schedule we were working with allowed for an hour of core math time. It allowed for an hour of building those foundational skills that children need to learn how to read, and allowed for an hour of our core literacy program that I can't say enough about, EL, that builds that sort of, another board member asked about how do we know if students are enjoying the structure of the day. And we now have adopted a program that really capitalizes on student engagement and embeds best practices throughout it. So that's fantastic. So we had those 3 core hours, and then we also had a schedule that really maximized intervention time. So to tell you what that looks like, when I had 20 students, I had an AST available for about 2.5 hours a week to use the data to form data-driven small groups, really targeting specific skills. And because we had such a robust staff available due to the schedule during our core academic times, we were able to provide intervention within that time. So students were receiving both their core instruction time, and we could pull little pockets of kids for 15-minute groups. We also had a staff that was really flexible. So we were able to look at like, okay, you are an academic support teacher and you are really strong at teaching math, and you were with these children in kindergarten. So can you just focus on math? We had the same true was in literacy. And then we had really outstanding paraeducators. So we started with having full-time paras a couple years ago in first grade at Academy. And that was another thing that all of us felt like it's so incredibly valuable to have support staff that are there full-time and for multiple years. One thing in addition to this was that all of our students were also able to get over an hour of outdoor time a day. So they'd get their half hour of core recess time, and they still were able to have a half hour of choice time or woods time or these other parts of the day that are just so critical for students to have time where they're just able to relax, rejuvenate, and come back to their academic learning. Really, all of it was because of the schedule and flexible staffing, and just a general attitude of really believing in the kids and being thankful for the year that they had prior to coming into first grade. Because while our data looked great, it's always about what does a child receive before that year of growth as well.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, for zooming in. I think one thing, if I could add to that, and this last quote on the bottom of the slide here, a teacher wrote directly that groove attitude toward really believing in kids and that we can make improvements. And there's an educational researcher named John Hattie who studies effect sizes of different interventions that schools try. And this is actually the top effect size of anything you can do in education. It doesn't matter what program, what schedule, how many people, those things do matter too. But really, the biggest thing that has an impact on a child's education is the teachers believing that the child can succeed. And when this came in directly from the team, where I was like, what happened here? It especially resonated for me with that research, to hear that voice directly from the teachers. Like, what impacted this was that we believed they could do it. And we had the systems and the supports and structures to then allow us to do it. And I hope I paraphrased that okay, Maureen. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of a whole cohort growth. Very quickly, this is an example of the progress monitoring graphs that we use in our DIBBLE system. This is also an oral reading fluency. So in this particular graph, let me see this little, so this is where the child started at the beginning of the year. They were a little bit below this gray bar, which is the kind of where we would expect a fourth grader to be, or what's the 40th percentile. And then this is the target for end of the year fourth grade. So it's not like it's static. We also want kids to be growing throughout the year. And this is an example of a teacher who has been reading, doing lots of stuff, and then reading with them for just 1 minute every week. And we can start to see how the student is growing and what the effects of the intervention are. And this is a really helpful tool that literally takes a minute a week. And many teachers don't need to do this every week. It's every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. But to start to see the trajectory of what's happening. They don't always look like this. Sometimes they're flat. And then that's really helpful data for the teaching team as well to say, we thought this would really work for Paul. Seems like we're not getting the effect that we wanted. What do we need to come together and change up so we can try to change this trajectory? And it's so helpful to know that here versus, here. And when we look at the VTCAP data that we get on an annual basis, it's really just here.
Right.
So that's an example of progress monitoring that teachers use, and one of the tools that we have to look at that. And finally, John Sessions is going to join us from Putney Central to share a little bit about what they implemented for a multi-layered system of support for some incidents that were happening at recess.
Do you, just to have an assessment of how much longer this presentation is, it's kind of a bit over.
John has 3 slides here.
Okay,
I'm just 5-ish.
Yeah. Yep. I'll be quick.
Sorry, John.
I don't want you to miss anything.
No.
No,
not at all. No, I appreciate your time. Yeah, so thanks. So Bryn asked me to talk a little bit about what this work can look like on the behavior side of things. And so, from our perspective, and has been brought up in many great examples around the district, the core of this MLS systems work is the work of connecting students to supports that we have in schools. And at PCS and at many schools around the district, we do that through the context of what we call the wellness team, which is a sort of diverse team of people in the student support realm and our job is to ensure sort of the well-being and the care and the progress of our students. And we meet weekly, and we go through on a very regular basis sort of the change cycle that I've demonstrated on the screen here on the slide of looking at data, talking about students, and identifying a need, designing intervention, implementing that change, reflecting on the effectiveness of that change, and then tweaking things that we're doing to support either groups of students or individual students. And this is work that really happens on a daily basis, day in and day out. And so I wanted to take you through an example of what that looked like when we confronted our behavior data on the playground last year. So on the next slide, Paul, we will go through some of that. So we started with identifying the need, and last fall, we noticed a trend that about almost 50% of our behavior referrals were happening on the playground, which was concerning to us as staff. We certainly felt that in the day-to-day, and it was also echoed by students. There wasn't a positive feeling about recess. Our student leadership team expressed concerns about how recess was going, and so we really identified that as a behavioral need happening school-wide across our 190 students at the time. And so that was all based on sort of behavior referral data that we were looking at. From there, we designed an intervention, which we call structured recess. And structured recess is a practice where when a behavior referral happens, a student is referred to structured recess, which happens in another part of the playground and is run by a staff member. It's often me or our behavior interventionist, or both of us. And every day, some students have to go to structured recess, but others choose to go because they might like the activity that we're playing that day. And so we're not taking away recess, but we're introducing an activity that is designed to allow students to work on the skills that they need to work on. And so we meet with every student. We have clear criteria of what it is that they're working on, what's their criteria for showing us that they're making progress and they're working towards their goals, and when they're ready to reintegrate back into regular recess. And so we implemented this starting last year in October, pretty early on in the year. And we've seen pretty consistently positive results. On the next slide, Paul, I think here's some pictures of structured recess. So it's, I choose the activity of the day. And so sometimes it's sort of collaborative teamwork activities. Sometimes it's more of a game-based, depending on what students are working on. And as I mentioned, we continue to monitor effectiveness of this. And what we've seen is that this year, our behavior referrals are down to about 18% on the playground. And so what we've seen is that recess is more engaging for students. We're teaching the skills for everybody to really be successful at recess and allowing them to practice them and sort of in a teachable moment rather than sort of taking away recess for students. It's an opportunity to sort of work on those skills and develop relationships. And so I just wanted to present that as just a sort of case study of what that can look like and what that collaborative teaming can look like from a behavioral side of things. So thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
So some questions for you all. Well, I'm actually going to ask the board to, since this was a bit longer than we had sort of time budgeted. So, you have questions for us?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask the board to hold off on their questions, and maybe you can either send them along and I can send them to Mark so he can be prepared next week, or you can, slap them on him next board meeting, I'm sure be prepared, but.
Well, these were the questions I prefaced the presentation, and it also is kind of a reflection of providing some more specific data examples for the board in terms of a reflection of the last board meeting where it didn't feel like we actually maybe did that very effectively. So I would be, very interested in hearing some feedback around what additionally the board would like to see in terms of a future MLSS update. There was a lot here. Is there something you'd like to see more specifically in terms of an element of the presentation tonight? What are you excited about in terms of our development and our vision moving towards MLSS work? And then frankly, what are some suggestions for improvement that you could share with us tonight? Not just tonight, in future meetings as well, but I mean, if we could take a few minutes just to open it up to some of these questions, I would appreciate it.
We are almost an hour, into this. And it seems like we do have other things to get to. I'm very excited about this because the board is always seeking data and trying to understand what are the people who go to these schools and have this big effect and influence on our kids. What are you doing? So it is very exciting to hear all this stuff. But I think we're going to have to put the questions off until the next board.
I would actually love if you would send these questions to us all, Kelly, in an email, and we could reply, singly. But I feel like I need a little bit of time to think about what to say to these really deep questions. But I did just want to say one thing that really stood out to me in this a whole entire awesome presentation was given our discussion we were having at the last meeting about school climate and how do we achieve these positive school cultures and stuff, that was so interesting to hear what this looks like from on a behavior and social emotional learning standpoint, because I think that a lot of the data that we usually talk about on the school board about improving and then they have benchmarks and stuff is academic, but just as we would never think to punish kids for not doing well on their academic work, we would recognize that as a need for intervention and skill building. That was so interesting to hear about that approach to behavior referrals. And I would love to hear more about what kind of stuff is going on like that.
Mm-hmm.
I can send them to you in an email, and then I can forward the responses along to Mark.
Great.
So and I can just when I send out the request for the for agenda items, Mark, whatever estimate you think you might want.
Sure.
Have to do that. Just please.
And can we just make sure that it would have been helpful, I think, for me to have this slideshow in advance because it was so full. But
I did send some, but there are some that are different. So there are some slides that are different, so maybe if we can get the updated.
Yes, and apologies for that, because all of our teachers were in PD right up to Thanksgiving break, and then so we'd be happy to send you there are a few updates that were made, and we'll send you that and make sure they get posted as well.
95% of it was shared last Tuesday.
This is a great presentation.
Yes.
So early on, early on, there was a slide specific to BUHS, which from a distance I could not see. So especially that one.
We'll get you the right thing.
Thank you very much.
We like sharing our layers.
Thank you.
Well, we're very proud of that. And thank you so much for your interest. I think that collective work to really support students, I think when we think of multi-layers of support, we're not just talking about the school systems, but our work with you all as a board is also another layer of support. And as we work together with that common goal, it feels so exciting to me, and I know to everyone here, to think about that collective work, that collective efficacy toward really keeping the students at the center of our work and having creative ways to support them
it's
because we
not
don't have
just-
it all figured out.
It's not just interesting for us, but this is why we are here.
Us too.
This is very exciting.
I want to thank Mark for listening to the board and having this presentation, so.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, well, actually, I'm going to call a 5-minute break at 7:16. You were completely done?
We're done.
Okay, all right. So actually, it's 7:17 now, so I'm gonna take advantage of that 1 extra minute. So I'm gonna call a 5-minute break, and we'll be back here to jump back into the rest of the admin report. We're back at 7:26. 10 minutes delayed, but thank you for your patience. So, Mark, I will hand it back over to you for an update on the LC orientation.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, so right before the break, Mo, Hart, and I hosted an orientation at Central Office for Leadership Council chairs. We had representatives from Demerson and BAMS show up for that orientation. We're planning a second orientation for Thursday night this week to hopefully get representatives from all of the other schools. And for the Thursday night meeting, the folks who did attend before the break are also invited to come back as an opportunity to make connections and potentially build relationships with the other leadership council chair people. So I'll just do a brief overview of how we organize the orientation. You all have paper packets that guided our work that night, which was about a 45-minute meeting. So the packet includes, the first part of the packet is simply the policy H7 around leadership councils as a reference. Next section of the packet is Leadership Council Code of Ethics that we reviewed with the chairs, and also shared that this is a draft of ethics that each leadership council can use as an example, but also there's nothing against a leadership council to add their own spin based on their community and their work. But we did feel it is important to have a code of ethics in place to help guide the work of leadership councils. We also provided, similarly to last year, a sample agenda of what we think is a best practice around a leadership council meeting, which again is identifying the leadership council, where the meeting will take place, at what time, in what room, and then a very specific agenda, a call to order by the chairperson, a welcome of the members and guests who show up to participate in the meeting, an approval of minutes from the previous meeting, an opportunity for a school board report to be given by the board representative, as well as a principal report from the school principal, and then more specific agenda around new business, other business around open comments and discussion, and then we felt any good meeting ends with collaborating on items for the meeting next month. So then that would lead to an adjournment. We also reviewed some leadership council norms in terms of operation. So really all leadership councils should be sending agendas and notice of meetings to Mo Hart 48 hours prior to that meeting so that it can be posted properly. Meetings should be run using Robert's Rules of Small Boards, which is much less formal than a school board meeting. But it does provide some direction around, communication, taking turns, raising your hand, not eating up all the space time, but providing equal opportunity for everybody at the meeting to participate. We reviewed the code of ethics, and minutes of the meeting will be provided within 5 days at the completion of the meeting. So those minutes can be posted on the website and can be accessible to the greater public. We then reviewed some systems that are currently in place in terms of monthly board reports. We reviewed the school-based reports that are delivered to the board prior to the first meeting of each month. And again, shared that is also an opportunity for leadership councils to share feedback, questions, or observations to the school board as part of that report. And then finally, we provided some resources around Robert's Rules for Small Boards, shared a statement of appreciation and support of leadership councils moving forward. We did take some time putting the SU website up on the whiteboard, and we actually, as a group, kind of cruised through the website. We showed off the reports to the board presentations tab, had a discussion around how these presentations can really give leadership councils a really good idea of the work that's happening on an ongoing basis at the board level and at the admin level. We highlighted how to navigate the school board elements of the website. We showed off the superintendent page, which shares many levels of communication, my emails to the community, the items of the new newsletter, the connection, and as well as the formal superintendent reports that also get sent to the board with the principal school reports prior to each month. So that felt helpful to spend some time just navigating the website together. And then finally, there was just time for leadership council folks to talk to each other and share with each other what are the things that they're focused on, what are the challenges that they're facing. It's just a nice opportunity to make connections, which is why at the end of the meeting, when we shared when the next follow-up meeting would take place, that they should certainly feel free to come back to the second meeting. Even though it's going to be the same material, it's another opportunity to meet some of the other folks in our leadership councils throughout the school district. In terms of challenges that was shared, and we've talked about this, there is a formal way in those reports to provide questions or feedback to the board. I think what's still missing is more of a formal way to respond to those reports. So I think that's something for us to continue to consider in how to approach that. A suggestion was also made that potentially we put together a feedback survey for each leadership council in terms of identifying how to approach that challenge. So part of me thought maybe the communications council could work towards maybe a basic survey to get some feedback from leadership councils on how to improve that regular monthly communication loop with the school board. And I would certainly help in the development of that as well. So that's the general approach to the orientation. Again, the next meeting will take place at 6 o'clock at central office on Thursday night.
Was there a discussion about how leadership councils are different from PTOs? Was there clarification about that?
One of the things we actually did at the orientation is we actually highlighted the two reports that were presented at the previous board meeting, one from Bedford Central School, which was the PTO report, and one from the Putney Central School, which was the Leadership Council report. And, you know, we had a conversation around, there's very much some similarities that happen at the parent engagement level in both areas. But we also did talk about the formality of a leadership council in terms of having an opportunity to give regular feedback to the board, to ask questions of the board, and to engage in that way, which is certainly much different from a PTO. So I think the element that we need to improve is we have a way to give the feedback from the LCs. How do we tighten up what that response looks like? And I don't think there's a magical answer to that, but certainly something we can collectively work on developing.
I feel like we have started, a process has emerged that to me feels like a much more satisfying and effective way to like bring the discussions and concerns of the leadership councils forward. And not every leadership council meeting has stuff that discussed at it that needs to be talked about at a board meeting.
Very true.
But I have observed that recently when there has been stuff like the lack of substitute teachers, the problems with the food at the UHS, that like the role of the board delegate on these is when there's something that the board needs to do something about, that's our job to bring it, to mention it during this moment in the meeting where we have these updates and not just leave it on a form for people to like glance by. But I feel like it does create a little bit of a, I feel like the thing of having people put stuff on a form is what makes them feel that question, because it's like, what are you gonna do with this? But when people are able to know in the conversation that like, I hear you, I'm gonna bring this to the board and see what we can do, then it feels like a satisfying way of being heard about these concerns. And so I think that is a more powerful like pathway than the written form.
Totally agreed. And the fact that we do have it on the agenda essentially every meeting for an opportunity for a council update. I think that's an improvement also. That wasn't there all of last year at least.
Yeah, I think it seems like it just started emerging in the last few months,
Yeah.
but that to me feels like this is how it's supposed to be working.
So I think we're getting there. And it's just like the presentation earlier tonight is developing.
Now, we are still with Mark, update on staff stipends for LCs.
So I think this is really a board decision. I know the request has been made, I think on multiple board meetings. I've kind of worked with Mike, our HR director, on supporting the request and how we would go about supporting that, which would be to follow the after-school program stipended hourly rate to support the staff participants. But to do that, we would just need, you know, the board had raised some concerns around supporting that, so I don't want to do something that the board doesn't support fully. So I guess that would be an opportunity for the group to discuss if we move forward with that or not.
Could you tell us what is the amount of money?
I don't know specifically off the top of my head, maybe one of the principals here has a better idea, but the hourly rate for an after-school, to run an after-school program is
$35 certified.
$35 an hour.
Okay.
Would this be, so who would be paid at $35 an hour? Are the teachers volunteering to do this, or how many people typically are in this?
It would be the teachers who are assigned to the leadership council.
The teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why we're having this discussion is because often 0 is the number of people who have volunteered to do it. And so this is, we're talking about it as a way to incentivize participation by teachers.
I was
Or
just
other
asking
staff.
a question if they were volunteering. I wasn't implying it. So the teachers are assigned to do it. Is there usually 1 or 2 teachers assigned?
They're not assigned, they volunteer.
Yeah.
They volunteer to do it.
Volunteer,
Okay.
yeah.
And can I ask a clarifying question?
Mhm.
Because we're talking about teachers a lot. Last meeting, we had 0 teachers, but we had 3 staff or faculty members. So how would that be differentiated?
Okay.
At the last time we talked about this, I feel like the consensus was that it was for any staff member, teacher, or anyone else. Does that create any problem when you're saying that there's a pay rate that's for certified staff? Can we give the same pay rate to anyone who does it?
I think we could, for sure, yeah. But I think it would be, you have to make a commitment to be on the committee. So you're showing up every month.
Yeah.
You don't just randomly show up and then charge the school district. There's a difference there.
I think that, so technically speaking, there could be 10 leadership councils. There aren't, right? There are more like 6 or 7 active ones.
You're 9.
There are 9? 9, okay, so 9 leadership councils. And on each of them, potentially, there could be a number of staff people because there's, 50% or more should be community members. That means, 49% could be staff. And so I think that it's hard for me to think about what the financial implications of this could be. If you crunch numbers and it's just like 2 hours per, leadership council per per month, it's probably like about 8,000 or something. But if we're talking about each school has 3 staff people, or it's more than 2 hours, it starts to expand. And I think that it's a valuable idea to bring forward, but without having even a range or estimate, it feels hard to make a decision.
So I would say if there are 10 meetings in a year, and there are 2 staff members on a committee, a leadership council committee, we're talking a $700 commitment.
And I will say, just from the high school perspective, with like 100 staff members, I would say
Oh,
we
for the
would
year.
be lucky to have 2 or 3 attend a leadership council and commit to that.
Sorry, say that one more time.
So like the 100 staff members, I would say 2 to 3 might commit to doing that.
I mean, at Putney Central School, there are 3. And, that's just what we have. And just to go back to what those numbers were, I mean, we're looking at that's for one school you're talking about, the financial
if
implications.
3 staff members
So that'd be 2,700.
showed up for 10 meetings for every school, it'd be $1,200. It's not, money shouldn't be the deterrent here.
And just to put this in context as well, like we have other teams from time to time that meet outside the contracted day. If I am inviting teachers to participate in a meeting, say farm to school, for example, like maybe say that's going to meet at 4:00 because that's when the farm to school coordinator can come, and I have teachers who really want to be involved in that, I have to pay them a stipend to attend. I can't have teachers attending meetings for school, after school hours, without providing compensation. And so if we want a robust leadership council with staff participation, then, it kind of goes without saying that we want to honor kind of the contract, right? If we're saying we're asking you to participate during this time representing the school as staff, which is different. For example, if I live in Guilford, and if I were a teacher at Dummerston School, I would be attending Dummerston School Leadership as a staff member, versus if I came and joined the Guilford Leadership Council, which I could, because I live here, I could join the Guilford Leadership Council, That's my community, that's my town, I'd be joining, volunteering to join. That's very different than if I'm a teacher at Guilford School and as part of my professional duty, I'm coming to a staff meeting to lend my expertise. So I think, you have to really see this from a teacher's point of view and a staff member's point of view. And I would encourage you to reach out to some of the teachers or staff members. We have at Dummerston, we have we're up to 4 or 5 staff members right now, and we have a paraeducator. And I would really encourage you to reach out to those teachers and find out, kind of what their perspective is on this. I think you'd
Frank,
be,
do you know if do we have it sounds like maybe about $3,000?
Well, I misspoke.
We were kind of
for
like,
just
give or take, but we're not talking $10,000. We're talking in relative terms compared to the size of our budget. This is a small amount. So I'm wondering if you can just respond to whether we have somewhere in the budget that we would be able to pull this out of that wouldn't affect, and we certainly don't want to affect things that we are really, really crude. We want to be able to do this in a beneficial way. Would we be able to do that?
We would, and to follow up on Julianne's point, Article 25.9, I think I was looking at it the other day, so it's in my head. Collective bargaining agreement says a voluntary assignment will be paid at $30 an hour. So what Julianne's point there is, we gotta be consistent with the contract. If we're asking for participation in a school-sponsored function, it does need to be voluntary in terms of that article.
And it's a regular function, and not just a random extra meeting. A regular commitment, yearly commitment.
Would it be possible for the principals to sort of poll the teachers and just to get a sense of how many from each would be, if this was something that we were?
Well, there's a system in the LC, in the articles for nominating teachers. So it's not, right? It's not
if we're not assigning, we're sort of, we're invited.
Right.
So I guess I'm trying to, how many teachers would be receptive to that invitation is what I'm trying to say. And maybe that would give the board a better sense of really the cost so that we can then move forward.
Well, it definitely would be less than $10,000. And, and as you say, in terms of the $28 million in payroll that we pay out, it is not a significant competition for another program. So, we would want to budget that, but that would not be the issue. That would not be the obstacle.
Can I ask a question, and it might be a question for some of the principals? Is there a system by which do you have like committee assignments, and are there teachers assigned to PTOs? Are there teachers assigned to the leadership councils? It feels like if that just like what you're saying, that consistency piece, could this just be a committee assignment?
Yeah, well, I'll say at Dummerston School we have we have school culture team, we have MLSS team, farm to school, we have a number of different teams, and there's a process we go through where teachers indicate their interest in those different teams. We make sure we have the right kind of representation on each team, right? So we have someone from early childhood, and we have, someone from our health, social emotional health team, and a middle school person, so we do that with all our teams. And what I really want to do and have done is said the leadership council is one of those teams, right? And looking at our membership, wanting to have 4 or 5 staff on there because that makes it a really rich experience. And we have that now, but we do have this issue is real, right? So, I've had teachers willing to sign up for that team, but they brought that forward as an issue. Like the teachers on the leadership council of Dummerston have brought that forward.
I think one of the differences would be like a regular commitment to a committee that meets after hours versus committees that meet during
the other ones
school
meet
day.
during the day. That's the thing. So school culture team that meets during the contracted day. So that's total, but
And
it's a
we've-
team and so is the leadership council.
And
So
we've shifted our schedule so that committees happen on Tuesdays when we have time built into
Right.
our schedule for staff, so that they don't have to meet outside of contracted hours. It's
Right.
built into
Yep.
their
Yes.
contracted day. And then this would be an additional
Yeah.
time that is held
Right.
after
I
contracted
think a
hours.
regular commitment, monthly commitment to a 6 o'clock meeting, that's something after a long day.
we could have leadership council at 2:45 p.m., but that would not be
Conducive
really
to
conducive for
families.
the community and families, right? So it's,
Yeah.
this is a compromise.
And very often, these kind of assignments with a stipend attached, there's an understanding that a given individual cannot make every meeting every month. And rather than paying it on a per meeting basis, it's an understanding that you attend 7 out of the 10 in order to receive the stipend.
Is it stipended or is it hourly?
I'm sorry.
Is it stipended or is it hourly? I thought it was.
I was just going as a stipend rather than an hourly rate, which feels, I don't know, not as, I don't know what it feels like. But I'm just saying that very often if you're committing to a leadership council, I would think you're committing for the period of a year, and therefore it would be a stipend that would be paid at the conclusion of the year, with the understanding that you're going to hopefully attend 7 out of the 10 in order to receive the full stipend.
Robin?
When you brought this up as comparable to another type of after hours work in the collective bargaining, how is that one paid? Is it all for the whole semester in one big chunk, or like by the time that they do it?
The time that they do it. So
Yeah.
for an example, if a teacher signs up to provide an after-school program for 6 weeks, that's outside of the contract, then they would be paid for those 6 weeks for an hourly rate essentially.
It would just be added to their bi-weekly paycheck, the amount for those 2 weeks of going on through the whole
There would be
period.
a time, basically a time, sheet that identifies the hours of service. Yeah.
I mean, is it legal to pay people at the end of a year for work performed? Because I thought that you had to pay within 30 days of the work.
Generally, you do, yeah.
So Eva and then, no, I,
Okay, I just think that Mark asked for how the board felt about it. I think you hear that we have consensus that it's fine. I think it's an administrative decision. You handle staff, you pay them, you figure out how to do it. So I think that what you saw, Mark, is general consensus from the board. I think you have it.
I just have one quick question, because I know that we don't have a lot of interest right now, but is there a cap as to like how many people can be on the leadership in each school? So is it 3 or is it 5 or is it?
My understanding is it needs to be less than 50% of community. Is that accurate? So you need to have at least 50% community members and the other 50% community of school staff and administration.
Okay, just because with the budget, you know, if we say that it's 10,000, are we going to say like you guys are free to do what you want, but the budget is $10,000 or something like that? Would that make sense?
I think it would, kind of like what Tim was just saying, leave it up to the individual discretion of the administration at each school site to decide what's a reasonable
We have,
approach.
I think all of our schools have been after-school aligned in
Yes.
our budget, and so that money would come out of that. Essentially, it would be you're paying, that's what that money is for paying staff and teachers to work after-school hours. Most of the time, that's for an after-school program, but you could use that money for paying the leadership council members, right, Ben?
Yeah,
Okay, we're Ruby, and then we are moving on.
I think that, I second what Tim said. I appreciate what you're saying, Mary. But I wonder if it would make sense or not to try to distinguish or separate out the investment in this particular piece. That because this is a committee, it's a committee driven by the board. So it feels different than an after school thing. But it feels to me like I don't hear any objections here. It seems like this is coming up from a request from teachers. It seems completely reasonable and in line with, our processes that are already in place. So, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer.
I was just saying the money exists.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so it's in the budget, you could just, move it around.
Okay, well, I'm calling the.
Do we need to vote on this, or can we just be like, do the thing?
Sorry.
Do we need a motion?
Do we need a motion, or we?
No.
Okay. Okay, so Mark can just determine whatever he needs, and then we can just stamp our approval maybe at the next meeting or whenever seems, okay. So we are moving on at 7:56, and we are way behind, so we're gonna try to get control of this. So we are on to the fiscal report. Frank, I'm going to go over to you.
Very good. I know we also had a motion on the agenda. Today we had our walkthrough for the Oak Grove heat pump project. That fifth firm that I had a motion for you to consider ultimately decided not to participate today. So we get to save that little bit of time on the agenda because it's not relevant. I did want to just say really briefly regarding Finance Committee, met this evening before the meeting, and then on the secondary proposal, met last Tuesday, the 14th, on the elementary proposal. So at this point, the bulk of the draft reports have been reviewed by Finance Committee and the Independent Budget Committee. The reports are on the website if the full board is interested in looking.
Recording in progress.
Hold on just one moment. Of the stuff.
Okay, that's just a quick update in terms of where the proposals are. Approximately 64 million when you combine the elementary and the secondary that we reviewed this evening is the proposal at this point, very preliminary, and that compares to 63 point something under the current budget. So we're less than 2% change at this point. We haven't reviewed our capital plan and fully funding that. That's the next topic on December 5th for budget development with the Finance Committee. So just a kind of a quick update with first draft for the full board, December 19th.
Okay, so we are moving on. Thank you, Frank, for that. And we're moving on to the consent agenda, the clerk's report. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 14, 2023?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of November 14, 2023, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstention? Okay. We are moving on. And picking up So, a public comment on non-agenda items. 10 minutes for that. Do we? Jody.
Jody Normando Darmerston. I have talked to Frank and I'm not sure whether they talked to Sean and Paul also, but requesting a couple of tutorials Maybe I should have gone to the Leadership Council meeting in Dummerston or wherever Mark had it. On the webpage, which is very, very difficult, I'd like to see a tutorial somewhere that you could keep referring to. The other thing that I, as a citizen, having difficulty with, and I've been a school board member, but a lot of things have changed. You've got so many initials. I have no clue what most of these initials are. It would be really nice if we had something that would explain codes, initials, synopsises on Act 127 would be nice. All of these things would be nice to get out to the public. And the state must have a synopsis somewhere that is readable on Act 127. So I'm just requesting that it be looked at further. I did talk to Frank about it. And Frank and Paul and Sean have been very good to get back to me on my questions. So I just want to thank them, but think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody?
I think those are great suggestions.
Carly?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question piggybacks on a question asked during the previous board meeting. There's been a bit of discussion about canceling one of the panorama surveys this year amidst some pretty serious school climate issues in some of our schools. And the question I'm referring to asked what other pathways are being used to collect data on school climate. So one of the answers given as I understood it was that benchmark meetings and team meetings are pathways to collecting data, and that there has been a behavioral line sometimes included in the data being collected for the MLSS. I have a concern about this because I don't believe it's necessarily an appropriate substitute for a school climate survey and or other forms of proper collection and analysis of data from all of the essential parties. So I do think that limited anecdotal stories are take an important role when used in an appropriate manner to improve the school climate. But if I'm understanding what is happening correctly, it's an inherently biased way to collect information. And since the scientific method doesn't really work this way, any conclusions drawn from this are not valid to be applied to the larger population. Team meetings, as far as I know, don't include students, who are the most important party involved and who should be at the center of the solution. They don't include parents most of the time, as far as I know, and teachers have expressed to me a hesitancy to speak up on school climate matters. For instance, I've interviewed dozens of people from many affected parties regarding school climate at BAMS. And I can say that some of the teachers and staff are speaking out privately, but have disclosed that they do not feel they can express themselves freely at school on this issue. So I'm wondering if I'm understanding what we are doing to collect data regarding school climate. If it is the case that only participants are teachers, staff, and administration, and at that, only the ones who feel comfortable speaking up, and if we're only including anecdotes brought to the table and not the many issues going unnoticed or unaddressed currently by those parties, if we're really getting a full picture, I didn't hear anything during that meeting about how the information being collected currently is being analyzed or used to adjust practices in the field. So if there's more to this, will someone elaborate? If not, are there plans to implement a strategy to collect and analyze data more rigorously and to implement changes based on the results?
Mark, would you? I will say that I usually read that people could, I will read it now because I think it's appropriate for this. Seems like a large question for a very important topic. That anyone making a comment can expect a response that falls into one of the following categories. Receive an acknowledgement of the comment with no further action planned. Receive an immediate response by the board chair or administration. Administration would be directed to contact and respond to the person. Clarification sought from the administration for a specified meeting. The topic would be added to a specified future board agenda. The matter would be referred to an executive session. A public hearing would be held on the matter. With those options there, Mark, I will ask you if you have a response or if you have another avenue that you would like to address this.
Yeah, I think tonight we shared many examples of how data is used routinely throughout a school year. In terms of climate specifically, what we do have in place formally in terms of like climate surveys is we have a student climate survey, we have a family climate survey, and we have a teacher perception climate survey. And all of those surveys and survey results are used to help identify goals in our continuous improvement plan. And then they're worked on routinely throughout a school year to assess how close we're getting to reaching our goal. So, you know, having a climate survey in place to collect the information is not a one and done. It's you get the information, you set goals, you identify action steps, and then throughout the school year, we assess whether we're meeting the mark to meet that goal. So it's a process. One is getting, like John had shared on the slideshow tonight, getting the data, reflecting on the data, setting a goal, identifying action steps, seeing where we are at any given point in time, and then adjusting the action steps or maintaining the action steps. So it's not a simple answer. There's a lot that goes into the utilization of data and then identifying goals and then identifying action steps to achieve those goals. And they may change throughout the school year based on the feedback that we're getting or seeing. If we're not moving the mark on a goal that we have, for example, around students being kind to each other, then we gotta identify different action steps. We have to have that flexibility to do that. I see Paul's got a hand up.
To that list, I would add the youth risk behavior survey that's done every other year, and it allows us to compare with other schools in Vermont.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Paul. Is there anyone else in the online who would like to make a public comment on non-agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we are moving on. Thank you for your comments. To unfinished business. The sexual abuse investigation, I can confirm that our attorney has again reached out to Amy Goddard and has been in communication. I don't have anything to share, but I do know that there has been recent communication between them, and so I'm hopeful that soon, I mean, it looks like we're at least making some progress because there is some confirmed communication. So that's what I have to share. Ruby.
I just have a inquiry about, so I hear that there's communication between our lawyer and Amy Goddard. I would hope that we, through you, are expressing some really strong desires to have an actual response. Because, and I'm assuming that that's happening, but I'm not hearing that in what you're saying. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear.
I can say that yes, I know that Amy is working on responding to us. Mm-hmm. So that is being done. Mindy.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I have this question that I think I asked before, but I'm wondering, is there some Has the board or any of the board members received information from the report yet? I guess I'm wondering if Attorney Goddard is simply tasked with presenting something that you think can be presented to the public, or is that going to be the only information the board receives? I'm asking if there's a discrepancy, if the board has or will receive information that the public doesn't.
What I'm going to say to you is that we are waiting for Amy to present to us something we can share with the public.
Has the board already received information from the report?
I'm not going to respond to what the board has or has not received. I will say that the board has not received anything that we can share. We have not received information that we can share with the public.
Has the board fulfilled all required reporting after receiving? Has the board fulfilled all of it? Have board members fulfilled all of their obligations to report suspected or reported child abuse? My understanding is that as agents of the school, even if it's historic, no matter when the abuse happened, when you receive information about suspected or confirmed child abuse, there is still mandated reporting in effect. Has the board fulfilled that obligation with any information they've received?
If we were required to do something, our attorney would indicate such, and we would certainly, of course, would be a step that we would take. I can say if there has been any indication of someone, anyone in the school, any ongoing anything, then the board would not even receive that. That would go to Mark as the superintendent, and Mark would address it as the superintendent.
When I spoke with an agent from the Vermont DCF, I was told that it's irrelevant whether the implicated or alleged perpetrator is currently an employee of the school or not.
Well, and I'm going to say that if the employee was a current member of the administration, the board wouldn't even come to the board. And that would go to the superintendent, and the superintendent would fulfill whatever requirement, legal requirement he was responsible for doing.
To your knowledge, have reports of historical abuse been reported to the Department of Children and Families? Have reports that have come to you or to Attorney Goddard been reported to DCF? I'm not asking about just current employees. I'm asking about reports of child abuse by current or former employees. Have all of those been turned over to DCF or reported to DCF? As my understanding after a conversation with DCF is that board members are mandated reporters, and that the current status or historical status of the alleged perpetrator doesn't negate that obligation.
Well, I'm not an attorney, so I couldn't give you any sort of legal analysis of that. But I do know that we are mandated reporters, so that if we did come across something that was required to be reported, that we would need to report that. And that's, if we were required to report it, then we certainly would. So, and I think we're going to move on from this.
So I need to get documentation from DCF that that's required? Is that?
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to clarify your question, and then we are going to move on.
My understanding from DCF is that mandated reporting applies even to former employees if they are alleged to have committed acts of child abuse.
DCF would know better than me. I'm not an attorney, and I don't work for DCF. But again, I will say that if it came to the board's attention that there was someone that needed to be reported to DCF, we certainly would do that. So, and we are now moving on to Continuation of food accessibility at district schools. This was a conversation that I'm sorry, I didn't check to make sure that there was anybody. Was there anyone else in the, no, okay, so we are. This was a topic that we discussed at the last meeting, and I think the board members wanted to just follow up on this and make sure that, sort of see what Hannah and you were talking about. UHS and schools and food.
Do I have more to add to that?
Yes, that's my question, yes.
I mean, it's a sit note.
I have a question. So I learned that Putney School has a pantry and a wardrobe program. Do you know how successful that is? Like, could you tell me anything about it? It sounds very. I was really excited to learn about it.
Putney Food Shelf, but it is not like much. It's food to take home.
Yeah,
but it has been very successful. All of the students utilize it. Families that are able to are asked to contribute as well, but nobody is ever turned away, and the students are allowed to make their own choices, and it's all part and parcel of the Putney Food Program that is based on the whole child wellness and making their own choices for their futures.
Could you also tell me about the wardrobe program too?
You know about that one?
So the food program is called Food for Kids, and it's actually a program of the Putney Food Shelf. That's a collaboration with the school. When you say the wardrobe program, do you mean
like you can go in and you can get a coat, you can get a pair of pants, like you can get you just go in and you just pick what you need.
So I think that there's my understanding, and I don't think John's on to confirm this, but one of the hats I wear is I work for a social service agency in Putney that collaborates with the school also and purchases certain article like gloves and articles of clothing, undergarments, things like that are available. In addition, I think they utilize their lost and found and other donations. They've received grants in the past for things like boots and those were grants that from before COVID were happening.
Okay, I'm just gonna say before Bryn, I neglected to say thank you to everyone who had contributed to the presentation. Thank you. Ruben, were you finished?
Yes.
So I'd like to stay focused on the issue that came up at the last board meeting, having to do with the amount of nutrition that students are receiving via the cafeteria at BUHS, and therefore I'm assuming it also affects students at bands as well, since they share the same cafeteria, and that students are not receiving enough to eat, and that they're hungry during the day. The other thing that came up is that several teachers are looking to supplement food to students out of their own pocket, hopefully being reimbursed. That is, for my taste, and I'm sorry for that term, an unfair burden on the part of teachers. This is a school-wide responsibility, a district-wide responsibility. And I'm concerned how we can address this immediately to offset food insecurity in our high school. So I'd like to stay focused on that topic.
Tim?
Yeah, other districts have handled food hunger in various ways, but one of the more common ways that I've found is the food pantry or the shared table or shared cooler. My understanding is that BUHS used to have a shared table and a shared cooler, but the cooler broke and it was never replaced. But my question is, when a student goes through the line, can they take 3 or 4 items and then say, well, I'm just going to donate this to the food pantry?
Sorry, I was looking, I know Susan's on here, I think there's a lot more information in terms of like how the process works. But I will say that, go ahead.
I am on. So what we actually, I think, Tim, that you were part of the email with Harley Sterling where he suggested the take 3 option where students who are even getting a home lunch can go through the line and take food because everybody's getting free meals right now. And then they can take that food and it can go directly to the share cooler, which Hannah has put back into the cafeteria at BUHS. I don't know how that's going because literally that was, I think, November 20th that information came through as an idea. So Hannah, I mean, I know that one of the things that's happening is that the food service management company is not keeping up with demands in the cafeteria, and we're actually meeting with them tomorrow to talk about that. They keep saying they're short-staffed, and but we go in there as last lunch is going in and the salad bar is decimated. There are probably maybe 15, burgers or chicken sandwiches. There's no pizza. There's not a lot of selection for these kids who are coming in at last lunch, and that's a problem. So we are going to address that tomorrow. And I think the share cooler option, I don't know how that's going right now, but I'm hopeful that that's a really good solution that students can take something more and then, be trained. We'll need to train the students to take what they're entitled to in terms of the meal program and take anything they don't want and put it in the share cooler. The problem is the share cooler needs to be maintained by somebody who's not in the food service management company. That's just not part of what they do, so we'll need to talk more about that.
That's the easy part. The hard part is getting students to buy into the fact that they can take more and then leave it when it's a little embarrassing, the adults in the building who are like, hey, you're not getting a milk. Can you get one and hand it to me when you walk over the threshold? And so you just said it. It's just training students to get in the habit of doing that. In my 3 years there's never been a share fridge in the cafeteria. So this is a very new concept to everyone in the building. That's the current student population. And we are working on on advertising the purpose. We did right before break. Chris Brewer at the last lunch said, we're leaving for break, there's still stuff in the share cooler, and a whole bunch of kids jumped up and went and grabbed extra milks and stuff like that.
That's great.
And one of the custodians the other day was emptying old milks out of the refrigerator, so it's...
That's what we need, yes.
Yeah. So it's a work in progress, and we're making steps.
I think that's absolutely correct, what you just said. It is a work in progress. We are... we've been on the food service management company Fresh Picks from the beginning of the year. We're now well into November, almost at the end of November. They have not responded to complaints that I keep fielding, and it's really frustrating. I feel buyer's remorse personally, because I feel like last year went so well, and now we're sitting here going, what have we done? So we'll see what happens tomorrow when we meet with them. We have, right now, they're not fulfilling their contract, and we have the option to penalize them fiscally after warning them, giving them warnings, 30-day written warnings of not performing. And the problem with that is, if we do that enough, they may say they don't want to renew their contract with us. It's a 5-year contract, but it's renewed every year. And then we're going to be in trouble ourselves. But again, we're stuck right now because we're not, it's not only BUHS BAMS, it's also, I'm seeing this in Academy School on a regular basis. So.
Robin?
Okay. I have a few things. First of all, I would like to understand a comment that you made at the last meeting, Hannah, that Fresh Pig said that they were constrained on these portion sizes by federal guidelines. So can you tell me more about the implications of that? Are they like, they're not allowed to give out more food? And who will get, is there a penalty of some sort? Like, what does that mean?
Susan?
Yeah, and let me jump in.
Okay, Frank.
Susan, let's address this together. Susan's the food service coordinator at the central office. She does a remarkable job sort of bringing together a very complex USDA OA. Paul, could you let me share screen? Or who's
Yes.
doing it? Answer the host, could I do a share screen? So Susan does a really great job, and she's been with us for, is it 3 or 4 years, Susan?
I think I'm on my 3rd year, yeah.
And it includes the transitions and the very challenging conditions we worked through the pandemic. So my point is Susan's just a terrific resource for the supervisory union and a great advocate for a high quality food service program. And she, as I was saying, she finds the balance between these regulations, the state monitoring, the auditing, but then our wellness committee, our food advisory committees, and delivery at the students' plate. So she's very instrumental, along with Mary Lou Steiner in the office, who does many things but also supports the program. So what I wanted to share with the board is what the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union Board reviewed and received back in March of 2023. It's the food service specification. And that's what your question is, Robin. So this is a 100-page document. It is part of the USDA required contract provision if we are going to accept their $2 million to run the National School Lunch Program. Okay, so it's just like with any contract, if you're going to take their money, you got to play by their rules. So I'm not going to go over the 100-page document. I'm wondering if anybody's on Zoom. I am.
It's up there.
Are you seeing that number 8 meals?
Yes.
Okay. So we're not going to go through all of this stuff, but real quickly to your point, Robin, this 119-page document absolutely spells out in a very minute detail obligations of the food service company, that's Fresh Picks in this case, and then the school food authority, that's us. It's 100 pages of rules, okay? One of them is meal patterns, so that's what you were asking about. And meal patterns do come down to quantity of meals served. That's what I'm scrolling through here. It identifies menus, and then the frequency of the meals served, and then the nutritional values that are behind those meals. So I'm gonna scroll down to a food calendar. Well, before I do that, I just happen to be going into the proportions that you were talking about. So here's some of the breakfast grains, ounces, grams of food, daily, weekly, and it gets into the vegetables, the grains, the calories, the sodium, trans fats, and so on. This is all in the specification. That's what you heard the other day being referred to. Here's another Exhibit B, specifically more on lunch. Meal patterns by age group, right? I know you're not going to absorb all of this in a flash, but you see what you're looking at is K-5, grades 6 through 8, grades 9 through 12. And so the answer is yes, Robin. There are very specific nutritional and quantity specifications, and that's what drives the bid process and pricing and employment and then ultimately reimbursement. And these are minimums. And then the other thing I wanted to show you is good old Exhibit 9. I hope our board remembers this. Back the Supervisory Union Board. Exhibit 9 is an innovation by the Brattleboro system. By the way, I'm scrolling through the actual Monday through Friday menus, So this is the basis of our food service program, what we engage them to provide. For example, Thursday we're getting crispy chicken, and then we're getting winter kale Caesar salad, carrot sticks, and so on. It's very specific.
But you mentioned these are minimums.
And then there are
So is there a rule that they are not allowed to provide more than the portion sizes that are mandated here? Or is it they must give at least that much food?
Susan, do you want to talk about maximums?
They talk about daily amount based on an average for a 5-day week. And when it comes to grades 9 through 12, they're saying that for lunch, the calories provided are 750 to 850 calories, which I know, I looked at that and I said, that's not very much. I know it's not very much for a growing teenager, but that's really what we're looking at. And if we start we can't, the food service management company students can take as much of the vegetable portion as they want, but that's not really going to fill them up. But they can't take as much of the meat or meat alternative portion as they want. It's just not, we are limited in terms of we have to keep a certain sodium level, a certain fat level, a certain sugar level. And those are the things that keep us from just having it be just a big buffet.
One last thing on that, if I may, and I know we have more questions. Exhibit 9 is the food quality standards. So as Susan was just talking about, the Brattleboro Town School Board years ago, I don't know if you were part of that, Robin, I think you were, Kim, said enough of this really low quality, high fat, high fructose corn syrup kind of diet. We're going to come in, if we're going to participate in the child nutrition program, we are going to change the minimum food specs. That was probably 2016, 17. It was the first in the state. It was led by Andy Patchouli when he was principal at Academy. And Exhibit 9 is several pages of the food quality that gets to the type of grains, the fact that we ban the trans fats, and so on. It doesn't specifically get to quantity apart from what Susan just referred to. So tomorrow, there's absolutely in that 119-page report a provision for us to hold them accountable to these performance standards. And we've been very disappointed this year. We've got a long relationship with this food service company, and it's definitely way outside of our experience. But they have failed to meet our expectations, and we're going to let them know that tomorrow. And there are consequences, and we will seek alternatives if they don't.
I have 2 more questions. One of them is, when you're talking about this donation pattern where if we get kids who brought home lunch to take the food and then put it in the share shelf, but yet Susan's saying that by the 3rd lunch, or whatever, how many you have, the last lunch, there's no food left. So isn't that problem going to be made worse if kids who have lunch are taking lunch?
100%, and we ran out of milk before break. Like, we had milk in the share cooler and they had no milk left in the cafeteria.
And that's the fundamental failure that the solution isn't let's find a workaround. The solution is get enough food in the food service system to properly meet our expectations.
And then this question is a more long-term one that I don't expect anyone to answer right now. But I've been hearing about these really disappointing experiences that people have been having, not just at VUHS, but at the other schools, Academia and other places too. And I know that we also have our own in-house run food service in Putney. And I know that in the past, we've been so happy with Fresh Picks that we haven't felt the need to try that at any other schools. But I know there's been a big change in the directorship there, and I think we're really feeling the impact of that. And I wonder if this might be the time when we really want to explore that option and hiring our own food service director for the district. Just something that I want to put out there. I know that no one's going to answer me right now, but I think we should be seriously considering that.
But we did during the bid cycle. We absolutely, this was, the USDA requires a 5-year cycle of, you're bidding it, it's not a renewal cycle, nobody has rights to the contract, and we absolutely did consider that. The reality is that will also require quite a investment in infrastructure and management, at the central office and or at each of the schools, where our principals will assume a lot more on, food service management, and there wasn't a viable alternative at the time, but they're certainly making it a lot more interesting at this point.
I mean, I think we should also think about how much is this impacting other things that we're trying to accomplish, and behavior needs and all those things that are coming up because of the problems with the food.
Matt?
Yeah, I think to sort of echo, perhaps respond more directly, Rob, your question, I'm wondering, what I'm hearing you say is that minimum for Fresh Picks, I imagine, is probably their maximum for a business. Like, if they're required as a minimum to provide this from a business perspective, that's all they're going to provide. So what we consider a minimum is likely Fresh Picks maximum. Is that accurate? Is that my understanding accurate?
We are really disappointed that back, I think it was 2015, the great state of Vermont child nutrition program required the public schools to go to a price per meal basis of a contract, not a food service program that's based on the quality of the food, and it's basically a price per meal, and that is the race to the bottom model. We fought against it. We didn't want that model. They required it if we wanted to be part of the food service program. However, I think that they've seen the consequences of that, and there are alternatives. I believe the Windham Northeast is an alternative system, and it is something we considered then and will consider again.
You said
I said Kim.
Yeah, a little concerned, just, kids with allergies and food sensitivities. I have a child that's allergic to the world. Cannot eat any fresh fruits, any fresh vegetables, any red meat, any pork items. So having these limitations at the school, especially with the third lunch, is really concerning, because yes, you can fill up on your salad, but what if that child can't eat salad? It's a major concern.
There is a provision in the contract specifically to accommodate students with food allergies and special considerations. So yeah, they're definitely identified as a provision in the contract that must be fulfilled.
But it's also, I remember when my oldest son was going through there, and they still forced him to take a salad every time, even though the nurse said he was allergic and did not have to take it. They needed a written doctor's note for them to stop putting a salad on his plate, on his tray.
Which I will say, I wish they were doing that now, and they're not doing that.
Yeah.
Because if they were doing that, more food would be going in the cafeteria, but that's not being.
Just another program in Maine, which I felt was very innovative. In order to contribute to the food pantry, they charge a student if he or she takes just 1 or 2 items, but if they take a full meal, then it's free. If they take a full meal and don't want it, then of course it goes to the pantry. It's an innovative way. But I'm glad that you brought up Windham Northeast, because they did privatize and they seem to be doing fine. That is viable solution, I think. But I would like to know, this might be a can of worms, but I would like to hear from the students. How many of them are really hungry by the fourth period that they're so hungry that it's distracting?
You want me to guess?
Yeah.
All of them.
Then
They're
that's
all,
unacceptable.
part of that is I've had,
That's
I
unacceptable.
but I have 5 adult children who they were all hungry through like they're teenagers. They're hungry
Then we
literally all
have
day
to do
long.
something about
But
So what can we do as a board to address this on an immediate basis? I appreciate there is a meeting tomorrow, but that does not mean this will be addressed in the next week or two. When you consider Maslow's pyramid of needs, and we're talking about social emotional learning, about children sitting in a classroom to be educated, and they're sitting there and they're hungry. This is reprehensible. So what can we do on an immediate basis to address this?
Well, the expectation is that it will be immediate. There will be either change in personnel or there will be change in the supply chain, but it will be immediate. There is no leniency on this going unaddressed. That's for sure. And we have seen responses when when it comes to our attention of a failure to perform. We have seen the hiring and so on. The issues around staffing is absolutely real. But it is why we contract, so that they are specialists. That's all they do. And we will hold them accountable.
Do you think another factor is the inflation of the rise in eggs and milk prices?
I'm sure it's a factor.
I'm sure it is.
Robin, very quickly, and then.
I just wanted to mention the other part of the concern that was originally brought forward from the Leadership Council was the really large amount of staff spending on these snacks. And that is one thing that I think we could address immediately as a board is, could we just allocate money for buying snacks for the school rather than teachers shopping for it out of their pockets?
Hannah?
I was gonna just mention that was something Deborah had brought up, so I just wanted to address that also, which is, the unfortunate thing is there are these limitations on how much, so even if Fresh Fix is doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, kids are still hungry because it's nutrition-wise, it's just not enough substance for them for lunch.
So I would caution against that. I suspected that would create more inequity than equity, in terms of what staff are advocating for what kids. It would definitely breach that specification that I just reviewed with you in terms of meeting meal patterns, meeting nutritional quality standards. That's a workaround. I would recommend that we hold them accountable to this contract. We have many years of experience of them meeting the expectation. Through the pandemic, they were cited by the state of Vermont, by what's our partner Sheila Humphrey, Food Connect, as an exemplary entity. So we know that they can do it. The same senior staff is there. There are people that they've lost, and it's very evident.
I just finished my second. So the second thing, they did just hire a new kitchen manager. I'm not sure exactly, but who seems fantastic and has great ideas and is very excited about doing stuff there. So I do want to just recognize the fact they do have a new person who seems like he's very invested in doing this work. In my first 2 years there, with the way it used to run, they would at the end of sea lunch, they would have a ton of food left over, and they would just send an email to all students and staff, there's food left, come on down and get it. And so then kids got extra food, which was awesome. For whatever reason, that's not something they're doing. There's no food left, but they're not doing that anymore. And so I don't know why, but.
So to Frank's point, we need to hold them accountable to get back to those practices.
Ruby?
I agree with what Frank's saying, but I also think that a reality, not just at UHS, but at all schools, is that teachers are spending money on snack already. And I as a parent spend a considerable amount of money to donate to my kids' classrooms for snack. From an equity perspective, because I was sending snack with my kid and a whole bunch of kids weren't getting snack and it just wasn't working for me. So I still send snack with my kid, but I get granola bars for everybody else. But that's because that teacher asked for support. And so I don't think that the snack, like solving the snack problem is going to solve the fresh picks problem. Like I think the meeting you're going to have is hopefully going to move things forward and hold them accountable in the way that you're talking about. But I don't think that we should lose the thread of this question about how do we support our teachers and take this burden off of them, because that's really happening. But I would like to divorce them, like these are two separate and distinct issues.
Matt?
I was just wondering, I appreciate the immediacy, and I'm wondering if you have a sense on how many days we'd be talking about in terms of that immediacy. Are we talking 1 or 2 days? Are we talking 14,
Could easily be
30?
one or 2 days, yeah. And it is directly tied to their personnel and the ordering, the shipping, the receiving, the prep in the kitchen. So our expectation will be in the
1 or 2 days. That's all. Thank you.
Robin, and then
I'm just kind of surprised at how it seems like the practices around providing snacks seems to be very different at the different schools. At Academy School, they send a thing at the beginning of the year that says, do you want to donate some money to help us buy snacks for the whole school? And do you want to give extra money to help somebody else that couldn't afford to pay? And then after that, they give every child snacks every day. So is that a difference in elementary and high school, that like snacks are allowed and then not allowed? Or why would this affect the meal contract if we were to provide snacks outside of the food service contract?
Susan, you want to respond to that?
So the snack issue, I know that at the elementary schools, they do ask for donations and they do buy snacks for the kids during the day that can be distributed. That does not play into our meal pattern standards from the USDA, but we are, our wellness policy states that all snacks provided during the school day need to be adhere to SMART snacks, which is another USDA program, so that they have to be limited in sugar and limited in all other things. And I've been trying to work with the school administration on that. I think that situation is mostly in the elementary schools. I think that in the high school or the middle school, I'm not really sure how they provide snacks. We do an after-school snack program at for Beams at Brattleboro area middle school. But of course, that's for enrolled students. But I know some of the students that are enrolled in or participating in athletics also can participate in that sometimes. And that's also Fresh Picks providing that. But I don't know beyond that what we do specifically to provide food beyond the share cooler that we've recently established, thanks to Hannah, which is pretty much available whenever the cafeteria is open, that students can go to that and see, is there a milk? Is there an apple? Is there a sandwich? And they grab it, without any question at all. So.
Okay, we're Kim and then Deborah, and then we're gonna try to.
And I don't know if it'd be possible, set up like a snack cabinet and have it different places, like at the nurse's office, have one in the administration area where, it can kind of still be overseen and kids aren't going in grabbing handfuls and handfuls. But where there are healthy snacks, granola bars, things like that kids could have, that when they're feeling hungry, in between classes, they can swing in and grab one. You know, if we have those throughout the, you know, a couple of places throughout the school, so it's not all congested in one area, but it's something that we could fund via the budget, and just making sure that we have those healthy snacks available for every kid that wants one and needs one.
Okay, we're gonna go to Deborah. Kelly, I do see you have your hand up, so hold on just a moment. I think Deborah.
So when I look at the calendar, the next SD board meeting is December 12th. And you are having a meeting tomorrow with Fresh Fix.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way for the board to have an understanding of the outcome of that meeting before December 12th? December 12th is a long time from now, given this situation.
Cool. Yeah, we can give an update tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, and it's also on the agenda for the SU meeting tomorrow.
That's what I'm wondering. So we can get an update at the SU meeting tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kelly?
Hi, everybody. I know this has been going on a while, so I'll try to keep it short, but something I'm really passionate about and have been from my duration at Academy and elsewhere. But I did meet with the food bank with my social workers the other day, because we've been advocating to try to get more backpacks, they're called. It's the food bags that we send home on the weekends for kids. And 6 years ago, or even 7 years ago, when I was assistant principal, I remember we had to advocate to get 50 bags a week. And now we're trying to get 100 bags a week. And I think I just want to draw the attention to sort of the larger community problem of increased hunger. And we're having a lot more families move in to our area because of the resources. They tell us we moved here to be homeless because of the resources here. And it's pretty incredible what they're going through. And we're trying so hard to make sure they're being fed. And the breaks from school get harder. There are kids who walk the halls on Fridays before a break saying, "Do you have any extra food I can bring home?" I mean, it's a pretty serious thing. So I think there's multiple issues, and certainly cafe services is one that looks like it's going to be addressed tomorrow. And we've been meeting with them, and it's gotten better at Academy. But regardless of that, we're throwing away food because they're not allowed to serve seconds. And we don't have a share cooler. I'm working on getting a new one right now, but they're literally putting extra food in the trash instead of being able to send it home with kids. So I think, thinking about what we have and how we can utilize it is really important. The food bank representatives mentioned that a woman in Bennington is the food service director, and she's also in charge of the other supplementary programs. And back when Allie West was here, we worked together to talk about how we could package the leftover lunch food into freezable things that could go home with kids with directions for reheating. So thinking about, like some out of the box ideas as far as that, just so we're utilizing all the food that we're paying cafe services for, which isn't cheap, but also making sure we all have a share cooler. We all have the backpack program. They mentioned over 400 people attended Veggie Van Go this past week. I mean, that's a really high number for a community. People are coming and they're using the services. So how do we connect to the greater community in that way too? Just kind of thinking about that. It's a big thing, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to feed the kids.
Thank you. So, Mark, I'm sure that you and Hannah and the other principals have heard that the board really wants to provide support. So you're going to have a meeting tomorrow. We're going to get some sort of a response about that. I'm not sure what the solution to this is, but I think we at this point need to hand it over to you to try and come up with some sort of a response, a solution, something that we can do. And I'm hopeful that it's clear the board wants to provide support. And if you have something that you can come back to us with that we might be able to do to provide that support.
Yeah, no, that's super appreciated. We'll have an update tomorrow night after the meeting. Tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are moving on from that very important item to policy and amendment, readoption of.
So the Policy and Amendment Committee has 3 policies for readoption. And I'm going to go through them as 3 separate motions. I move that the WSESD approve for readoption C9, Notice of Non-Discrimination.
A motion has been made to readopt C9, Notice of Non-Discrimination. All those, is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting C9, Notice of Non-Discrimination, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Okay. And I just want to say each of these 3 policies have gone through 2 readings. So I move that the WSESD approve for readoption D11, Public Complaints about Personnel.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving D11, Public Complaints about Personnel, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
And finally, I move that the WSESD approve for readoption F2, Bus Discipline.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving F2 Bus Discipline, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. So
Then the next issue is a policy coming up for a second reading, and it is D1, Personnel Recruitment, Selection, Appointment, and Background Checks. So it's a second reading. I invite everyone, community members, everyone, to take a look at this policy and offer suggestions and comments to anyone sitting at this table, any administrator. It will definitely come back to the committee. So this is for a second reading. And if there is no comment, it will be presented at the next board meeting for readoption.
Okay. And now we are on to new business. We are back to Deborah.
And this policy, F32, Student Distribution of Literature, is being presented this evening for a first reading. So again, please take a look at the policy and any comments, suggestions, get back to us. Thank you.
Okay. So we are now moving on to board matters training, leadership council updates. Did we have any updates?
The Putney Central School Leadership Council met and they considered the questions that are they're supposed to consider. The 2 questions that they wanted to pass on were very similar, and essentially it is in keeping with what we've talked about before. They are wondering about the communication question that Mark raised, but in addition, the leadership of the Putney Leadership Council was not at the Leadership Council orientation. They're going to be there tomorrow. So that it could be that this changes.
It got moved to Thursday.
Oh, Thursday. But I think that there was discussion around a desire to bring together in some more consistent way, or with more than just the chairs and clerks, leadership councils to share information and share kind of processes. We've talked over time about this leadership council summit idea, you know, so that came up again, and particularly as we talked about strengthening our own, but also looking to how do we support each other, other schools that might not have systems in place. So that was just kind of an acknowledgement and a suggestion or a question of how could this happen? How could we make this happen? So that's all.
That's great.
That seems really aligned with the practices in the district.
Matt?
I attended the Green Street School Leadership Council last week, and it was a great event. Really great principal report. They did have one question from the Leadership Council that they wanted me to bring to the board. And I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but they were wondering about the graduation rate in the high school. A basic Google search that I went on at the time indicated a 77% graduation rate, but I was curious from administration if that was accurate.
Might be a little lower than that. I think it's 73.
73%?
I think.
Okay.
Well, I would say let's come back to the next meeting with a very specific number.
Sure.
That's a good question.
Any other leadership council? Okay. We are moving on.
This is not a leadership council update, but I was just wondering if, going forward, we could also include the CPAC in this portion of the meeting if there's, updates that Anne has from their meeting so that we could hear what's going on.
Either there or under board subcommittees.
Okay.
Certainly, yeah, absolutely. Which, that's the next topic. Any board subcommittee?
Just maybe a response to Robin's suggestion. It's a good suggestion. I wonder if that would be more appropriate at the SU board level meeting.
I hope that it's happening there too.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of us who aren't on the SU and still are wanting to know about how like special ed families are feeling like they're doing so. I don't know, Anne, if you mind giving the update 2 times, or maybe if it could be something where like at the SU meeting I shared that the CPAC said blah, 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 and then here's what the board responded. I mean, I assume that would be in the minutes as well, but I'm just asking because I really want to, the intention of that committee is to like create communication from the stakeholders and the schools, and I feel like we have a role in that communication flow, so I don't want it to be something that, it seems like there's like more community engagement with the SD meetings than the SU, and that I just want to like uplift their work and make it available to as many people as can hear about it.
Okay.
I would say the Finance Committee, as everybody knows, been meeting every Tuesday, and we will continue to do so until we are able to present a draft budget on December 12th. And it's really satisfying to see the amount of work that goes into this budget development. Staff talk to administrators, and then administrators go to the central office and speak with Mark and Frank. And so it's hundreds of pages, and there's so many different things that have to be dealt with now that the pandemic is behind us a little bit, and the federal funds are behind us, and how to, circle the wagons and do what needs to be done, and make it fair for everybody in the district.
Any other board subcommittees before we move on? Very quick.
Can I just confirm about our next meetings? You said the budget at December 12th.
No,
You mentioned
the
December
12th
19th.
And the 12th.
And then, are we meeting on just the 12th and the 19th next month? 2 weeks in a row as a full board?
I think so. Isn't that what we
Typically, yeah. And then, Mark, you wanted to consider moving to the 20th instead of the 19th? It certainly doesn't matter to me. We set it up to go to the 19th and for the SD and the 20th for the SU. Certainly could be on the same evening. The SD on the 20th as well as the SU on the 20th. One
my
meeting.
hope was we could make that switch.
So like a joint meeting?
Yeah. One meeting at 5 and then another meeting at 6. For the SU, it would have been the 5th meeting or 4th meeting, in terms of budget development. It's been every week since the 29th. So, I know Mark had a conflict on the
I do. I have it we have a management meeting tomorrow, myself, Deborah, Kelly, and Ann, and I have that on the agenda to kind of talk about it as a leadership group, so.
Okay, so maybe I'll send out after that, maybe I'll send out an email to the board, and you can just kind of get back to me on your responses on it.
That'd be great.
So does that mean there'll be an email that will list every SD meeting and every SU meeting as we deal with budgetary issues? It would be just nice to see it all together.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
There it is.
Yep.
Not,
Oh, you need it on the count,
that's a lot of stuff on that page.
Yeah, I'm just
it's-
using the numbers.
I appreciate that. It's a little
And they're just budget meetings. That's not like everything, it's just budget.
I understand that, so it would just be nice to pull it out from there, please.
Maybe
You
we
probably
can,
haven't seen your email, but I have sent another draft of a way to look at those meetings that we'll review as a group tomorrow. So.
okay, sounds
Okay.
good, sounds good.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm moving on from board subcommittees to board training resources. The only thing I really have on that is last meeting we talked about a Google Drive location for articles or that sort of thing to be put on.
Oh, no.
And I think
No, let me
think
just
that's
make a quick motion. It'd be really quick.
Well,
well.
We talked about a
can we hear
motion
the
already.
rest of Kelly's sentence?
Oh wait a minute.
I just want to hear what she was going to say first.
Well, I was just I was just sort of bringing it up that it was created. Did you sent that
Yeah,
to everyone?
all of you, yeah.
Okay.
If you look in your Google thing under shared drives, it'll be.
And so please feel free to put things there if you wish. You can email them. If you find an article, you can email it out to everyone and or put it on there, however it is that you think would be useful. And Tim?
Okay. Quick motion. Motion to approve up to $100 per term reimbursement to school board members for subscriptions to either American School Board Journal, Education Week, or Education Leadership. These are far and away the most popular journals read among board members, according to my research.
Didn't we just vote yes to a motion for that expenditure last meeting?
No.
We voted for a motion to allow up to $100 per board member per year. But I think it was also still pending the listing of
Pending specification of which publications.
which publications.
Right.
So
you're limiting it to those 3 instead of a resource that was going to be created by, with input from somebody? Was it from admin?
Well, the drive, the Google Drive was created, so now everyone has the access to it to compile them.
Right, okay, so that was like to create the list of
Like
journals.
if you come across something and you want to have everyone be able to have access to it, but it sounds like Tim is indicating an additional resource. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Ruby?
I guess I thought these were 2 different issues. I thought that having a Google Drive and utilizing it is functionally something that we should be doing and we are hopefully going to be doing. And I'm just looking at the minutes from last month. We did approve the expenditure of $100 per board member, but it was based on a list of resources approved by the board.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And I thought that that's what we were going to create in the Google Drive.
No.
Right, that's what we're gonna create. The Google Drive is a handy place to put it, but to me, the Google Drive, like that we're doing the Google Drive is so fantastic. I cannot tell you how frustrating it's been on this board to find information in my email. It's just impossible. So I love that we think about these things, 2 things together, but I'm confused about why we're talking about the resource list. It'd be great to start collecting it, but ultimately, if Tim wants to start start a list and then we add to it and then we consider it, great.
I mentioned it because it was what I was thinking when I in this, I mean, it wasn't the only thing. I mean, I was thinking of a number of different things, which was, that was one of them. And I just wanted to kind of bring it back, our attention back to that. And then, but then also.
Motion withdrawn since it's already.
And may I just have one follow-up with the Google Drive, is that I checked the shared drive and I do not see it. So I think that there, like logistically, I think that there's some work that could be done to make sure that we all can access Google Drive. Like that's point A. Let's do that thing, make sure we're in there, we all understand it, you know.
Maybe we can also have some instructions on this, here are the instructions for people such as myself.
You're on it.
You know, have
Really.
chapters.
Yeah, I can access it and you're on there as a member.
I don't see it in my shared drives.
Not your personal shared drive, your school shared drive. It's not there.
That's
I'll send it to
what
you
it
again.
is. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry?
So do we want to talk about a future board meeting on Tuesday, January 9, that we have invited?
Oh, geez.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah, I spoke to, God, thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome. Again.
I spoke to the Vermont Students Against Racism Consortium, and they would be thrilled to present a 1-hour presentation on this campaign they have, Let Us Be Great, on January 9th.
That's great.
And that date works with our calendar and everything.
I think so. Is it?
To go back to the Google Drive thing, when you say that there's a Google Drive, are you talking about there's a document that is shared amongst us? Is that
There's a
what you're
drive
talking
and
about?
there's a document in it.
Okay,
There's
there
both.
is. So
Come look over here, I have it out.
No, I think I see it. To me, that's not like having a shared Google Drive. Like
There is a shared
I do
Google
not
Drive.
mind what alterations you make to the organization of it. It's just a drive. I created it because the school district, the board has an email address.
Yes.
And I used it to create the drive. You want to make a spreadsheet, you want to make index cards, I will not be offended.
It's here, so there are drives and then
It's
there's one document in it so far.
Right, I guess what I'm saying is.
So
and
I'm wondering if some of this, do we need to do this during the meeting or do every?
I would be happy to, like, I think that I'm gonna be calling a communications council meeting and perhaps we can discuss this because I think that we need a shared folder system. And that's the only way it will work. But we do not need to take up this time. I just wanted to be clear about what we're talking about.
Thank you very much for sort of recognizing that and addressing that and let us know what, if there's something that we can do or.
Okay.
Is there anything else from anyone else who would like to share or comment, concern?
Madam Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning at 9:13?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, we are adjourned at 9:13. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for your patience for us having gone past.
There you are.